afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the March 5th meeting of the Portland City Council. Would you please call the roll, Carla?
Fritz.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Novick.
Here.
Hales.
Here. And we have one item before us. Would you read that for us, please, Carla?
Item 251, adopt the West Quadrant Plan as direction for updating the Central City Plan.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Let me set the stage for this afternoon's discussion. We had, of course, a very lengthy hearing on the proposed West Quadrant Plan a month ago. This is a quadrant plan that is providing direction in the development of the Central City Plan, part of the city's comprehensive plan, dealing with economic activity, dealing with housing, access to the river, habitat, lots of issues. So again, we had a lengthy hearing in which some of you who are here today probably participated. We've also received quite a bit of written communications as well. We've literally heard from hundreds of people on this hearing, on this piece of work, and we appreciate it. We have a process today to put before the council a series of proposed amendments that we're going to hear about in groups from our Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff, and then have council action to take up those amendments and decide which ones we want to discuss and which ones we want to adopt, and then we'll take testimony on the amendments that are before the council. So with that, I want to call up Susan Anderson and Joe Zender to walk us through the first part of that process.
And to be clear, Mayor, we are proposing to go through the amendments to decide whether or not to put them on the table for discussion, not to say that we...
To adopt them for discussion purposes. I've been retrained to not say put them on the table, because in parliamentary procedure that means to put them on the shelf. So I've had to retrain myself to not say it like you said it, because that's how was my habit as well. But we will have council action to consider those amendments and then take public testimony on them.
All right, good afternoon. Mayor, Council, Susan Anderson, Director of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and with me, Joe Zender, Sally Edmonds, and Carl Lyle, who I almost forgot his name because he's left us and is now working for the Office of Management and Finance. He was stolen from us.
That'll come back to haunt you.
Yeah, I think it will. So there you go.
Oh, what's his name? Yeah, it's
Oh,
nice to
what's
have
his
you.
name? Who did all the work here. So I want to start by echoing the mayor and thanking the public for their time, their thoughtful involvement. Since we were here last, we've had dozens, if not hundreds, of conversations around policy issues, specific actions, and specific proposed zoning changes. From these discussions and from numerous discussions with your staff and with you as individuals, we've put together a very large package of amendments. In a minute, we'll review them. As the mayor mentioned, we're going to do it in bundles. Hopefully, we've set up a process and some documentation there that will make it easy to walk through all of the amendments. Before we get to that, though, I want to once again remind you all that at this time, we are just passing a resolution. It's an interim step to the final Central City Plan. Today's resolution will provide BPS with very specific policy direction. We'll be back again in front of you in a few months with a similar resolution for the Central East Side. And then we will merge the quadrant plans together, come back to you with the overall Central City Plan. And that's when you will adopt it by ordinance, including the zoning code recommendations at that time. If there's any questions about the process?
I just want to do a thank you before we get started. We all have our cheat sheets that you've prepared, and there may be some people in the room wondering how we square this with our policy on paper usage and the climate action plan, but it's actually set up this way so that I can read it. So
We
I
appreciate it.
just want to thank you for setting it up in such a logical way and also using fonts that I can read. So I really appreciate it.
I'll hand it over to Joe.
Okay, this will be very brief. I'm Joe Zender with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We're talking about the West Quadrant today, shown on the map. It's the west side of the Central City, the side of the Central City west of the Willamette, from the Pearl District in the north, South Waterfront in the south, and Goose Hollow in the east, or the west. And it's an adoption of the policy direction plan by resolution. We're going to come back to you, as Susan said, later with the adopting and implementing code. So some of the direction today you're giving us is which, just sort of provisions to build into that code, and we will come back with options. The way the testimony is organized, you just saw the document from Commissioner Fish. It's all the amendments that we got from city council offices and the testimony organized into 5 sort of groups. We have a group on the Willamette River Environment and Parks. We have a group on building heights and step down to the river. We have a group on required residential development overlay. Mostly this is in the Goose Hollow. A miscellaneous group, and then finally the last group are changes to the action tables, and those really focus on changes to either timing, moving it up or moving it back in terms of when the implementation action might take place, or who the implementer or the lead implementer is. So all that's what's in your package. The table itself identifies the source of the proposed amendment. As you read across from right to left, the location in the plan for the specific reference, and all these are based on the West Quadrant Plan document that was distributed to you at your first hearing. Proposed language that is the amendment, and then on the far left in staff's recommendation, the reasoning and staff recommendation, and on the far right side is a box that says discuss or not. And the mayor's going to lead us through the process of identifying which of these to discuss individually and which to consider as consent. The second document for today is this 8.5 by 11 West Quadrant Plan additional amendments. And here we have 7 additional amendments that sort of came in after we made the big document. So I want to make sure you have all the paper. So it says West Quadrant Plan additional amendments.
Make sure everybody has that.
I'm not sure we all have that.
Don't know if I have that.
Carla, do you have those?
I think we'll have extras here. Yeah, we'll go get some from outside to make sure everyone has.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
Make sure we've got enough of
You have it,
those.
Commissioner Fish?
Others need those as well, so, okay.
These are ones from this morning predominantly.
Hands got them, but we need maybe a couple more sets up here.
So there's 7 amendments on this list that you'll see when it comes, and these were brought, like I say, like Susan said, they came in the last couple of days after we had already prepared the other sheet. And just to get a sense of what's in this package, you'll see there's a proposed amendment directing staff on the development of a new bonus system proposal to bring back to you all. There's reiteration of the no net loss of housing policy. There's some discussion of the reconfiguration of the Morrison bridgehead ramps and a freight movement. And then once again, there's a couple that are just changes to the action table timing and implementers. So it'll be the same drill. Some of those you may want to discuss, some you may feel like can go on the consent list. And with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor.
Okay, so let's start stepping our way into this, and that is, in both of these, yeah, so we should consider these as a package for purposes of taking action on the consent list, right?
Correct.
The ones that are not checked.
That is
And
the
are therefore,
consent list.
the staff does not believe that the council wants to discuss. Okay, the ones that have no check on the word discuss. We believe that those amendments are consensus amendments based on the hearing and on council discussion during and subsequent to the hearing. So,
I move that package as package consent A.
okay, now, and is there a second to that?
These are the ones that are not checked.
Not checked.
Not checked.
Second.
Okay, now, does anybody on the council want to remove anything from that consent list and discuss it? Because we can do that and then take action on the remainder. Now, again, I know there's a long list here, but we believe that there are no issues that council members want to discuss on all those that are not checked.
And Mayor, just to be clear, we've been given in advance of this hearing the cheat sheet.
Right.
We've also been given individual briefings on the ones that don't have a check, which just means that the Bureau doesn't have an objection, they're not aware of an objection, so they have presented them as the potential for a block of consent items. But now we have a chance to scrub that to see whether we want to take something out.
Right.
And for those watching at home who may not have access to, well, who don't have access to this document, the three that are not, that are being proposed to be adopted on consent are a set of action items for affordable housing, specifying pretty much our current policy. One, to remove the Water Bureau and Portland Bureau of Transportation from the interagency team proposed to provide coordinated environmental permit reviews, streamlining, and then also to delete an action item from this Old Town Chinatown section because it's the same as one in the Central City section.
Okay, so any further discussion about that? And so then, again, for those of you who are following this process, again, we've got this long document with amendments 1 through 72, plus this document from today that are amendments A through G. And if we pass this motion, we will have adopted the amendments marked with no check mark under the word discuss, and those will be before the council for deliberation today. So some of those amendments change things, some of them don't change things, some of them change language, but that's the action that we'll be taking by this vote. So all comfortable with where we are and ready to move forward on that vote? Okay.
What about where the Bureau doesn't agree with the amendment, but it's not checked for discuss?
That means we're not adopting that amendment.
Well,
So, right? Sorry.
so for instance, number 22 is one of my amendments on Waterfront Park. And BPS recommendation is staff does not support, but then the check mark, the box is not checked to say that we're going to discuss that.
So the way it works is that if we didn't check the box, we're suggesting that you would not like to discuss those items. In some cases, we've agreed, and in some cases, we've disagreed with the recommendation. And we've gone and talked to your offices about that. And so the question really still before you is, are there items that we did not check that you still want to pull off the consent?
No, that's,
Well, and
what
just
my
the-
question is,
22 is an error. The whole Waterfront Park package, there's a number of those were supposed to be checked, Commissioner, so we missed 22. So it should be checked as well.
Right, I think
The
this
same
is
as 18. There's
18, 22,
there's
and
several
24.
of them that are related to Waterfront Park that we wanted to discuss.
Okay, 18 is checked on mine.
Right, and 22 should have been checked.
and
22
24 now is checked.
24
So
is
I
checked.
just want to
So-
make sure that
You were reading
where
it
there's a
right.
disagreement between the request and the Bureau of Planning,
Right.
we're going to discuss
We're
all
going
of
to discuss
those,
those, right,
Okay.
right,
not just
Yes.
taking one side or the other without discussion.
correct.
That was our intent.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we are checking number 22 then, so that we can
Yeah.
discuss it, right?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So again, any further questions or concerns by the council before we adopt the BPS recommendation?
Mr. Mayor, sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. It's possible that the council might want to consider, just to clarify, moving and introducing each bundle, and then that's enough to get it, I'll say, on the table for consideration, and then save an actual vote
Okay.
until after the hearing and discussion.
So, okay, so we're approving for consideration.
Correct.
So
So-
the motion is to approve for our consideration the consent list of
Package A.
Package A amendments that we're not going to discuss further at this point.
And that's sufficient for now.
Okay, thank you. All right? Roll call then, please.
Fritz,
So, sorry, I think I wasn't clear. By sufficient, I think we don't necessarily need a vote on the amendments at this point. They can be introduced, seconded.
Seconded,
Then they're
okay.
before you for consideration, and then you can move forward.
You know, we often do that. We have the vote in any event. That's by by practice. Is that redundant?
Well, no, it's not necessarily redundant. I think it just leaves open the possibility that if something develops in the course of the discussion, then you can revisit the amendments and you won't have actually voted to adopt them if you don't vote now. Does that make sense?
Well, and I think it's clearer for everybody who's waiting to give us their opinion that.
That's fine,
without,
too.
Without voting,
Right.
if we don't vote on it now, otherwise it could appear that we've already made up our minds on that.
There's that too.
Or maybe it's
Right,
also.
well, the only other concern here, I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Fish, and I'll.
I think I think that we may also be dealing with the difference between a resolution and an ordinance.
Yeah, this is a resolution.
Because what we typically do is adopt an amendment, and we're going to say lay it on the table, because I think it just is the more common sense knowledge, even though the mayor's correct, it means we tabled it, and then take testimony on it. But as long as the public understands that we're putting this package before them for consideration.
Right.
And if a second is sufficient, then you've told us that's enough.
I think it's sufficient at this point.
Okay, then we'll
That's our intent.
consider that put on the table for discussion. I'll go back to my old language, because we just were told that we can. And again, later, we're going to take public testimony on the amendments that are before the council, only on amendments that are before the council. Okay, now, then our next step is to start taking up council discussion of the amendments that have been checked for discussion in groups. And then after that, we'll see if there are any additional amendments from members of the council that people want to propose. Okay? So the first group deal with habitat issues, and they are amendments number 7 through 11, right?
Correct.
So why don't you walk us briefly through those?
I'm going to ask Mindy Brooks to join us. And I'm going to advance this. And here's a graphic of the central city to support the explanation. Take it away, Mindy.
Okay?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Mindy Brooks with Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Amendments 7 through 11 on the table are a package related to fish and wildlife habitat improvements in the Central Reach. And as Joe just said, the map on the screen represents the full habitat strategy there. So the package of amendments includes 3 parts: an updated policy, a clarified target, and 3 actions within this reach. And I want to let you know that we worked closely with Bureau of Environmental Services to develop this package. The first thing we did is we removed the numeric target from the policy language. Oh,
Just
yeah.
to be clear, when you say you work with BES on the package, you're talking about the revised package that's before us today.
That is correct, yes. So the first step is we removed the numeric target from the policy. So the policy language, and that would be number 7, reads like a policy. And then second, we moved that numeric target from the Riverbank Enhancement and Restoration memo that was located in the back in Appendix C. We pulled that up into the body of the document. So the target now reads to enhance 2.4 miles of riverbanks and restore at least 5 shallow water areas in the Central Reach, with at least 2 sites located on each side of the riverbank. So that target's now within the body, would now be within the body of the document. And third, we drafted 3 actions that would achieve that target. The first action is an overarching action, and it's to develop an action plan to enhance and restore fish and wildlife habitat. We expect that to take about 2 to 5 years. But we want to get started on something sooner. So the second action is to perform a feasibility study on 2 locations in the Central Reach, and then the third action is actually to choose one of those, the most feasible of those, and design and actually implement the project. So staff feel this package will improve fish and wildlife habitat in the near term and set up an approach to achieving the long-term targets. That's just a quick summary. I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Okay, questions on this package?
So Mayor, are we going to call 7 through 11 its own cluster?
Yes.
So we're going to call this Package B,
We can.
just to
I
keep
like-
it.
I like that
keep it-
system. So package B is the habitat group that's just been described. You want us to go ahead and take a motion on each of those
Well, let's
as we
let's have a-
proceed,
let's-
or?
Let's take up a discussion on this.
Okay.
Let me just offer, as by way of commentary, that there's been some extensive conversations between BPS, BES, your office and others over these. I am the commissioner in charge of BES, and these are now a total of
Five. I think.
Five?
Yeah.
5 items, and I can, on behalf of my bureau, we concur in the BPS recommended changes on all 5.
Okay.
And I would move this as package B.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on putting this package on the table with the rest? Okay, done. So that's before us as well. Now let's move to package C, which is the waterfront park amendments 18, 24, and 69, correct?
18, 24, 22. We
22.
just added 57 and 69. And I'll ask Debbie Bischoff to join me to explain sort of the thrust of this package.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Debbie Bischoff, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. These 4 items are related to Waterfront Park. One is related to the master plan update and the timeline that it would happen. At this point, there was a recommendation for changing it to 6 to 20 years from Commissioner Fritz and Parks. We heard a lot of testimony and a lot of public discussion through our Stakeholder Advisory Committee and at public events and meetings that this is a high priority, and we would recommend, as staff, retaining the 2 to 5 year timeline for updating it, recognizing that the funding of such an endeavor would need to be accomplished. On 22, the one that we just took off consent, that is one that talks about creating visual cues from street corridors, attracting people from the district to the park. And it is one that, again, was recommended to be, it goes with the Waterfront Park Master Plan update. Again, the timeline is the question at hand here, as is the same with item 24, which looks at incorporating plantings at Waterfront Park. And I think that we, as Bureau of Planning staff, feel that this particular action, it's not meant to be all along the Willamette. It's meant to be focused. It's part of the downtown district plan and really focused on Waterfront Park. And again, the timeline issue is still the same there. On number 57, I think, is another one that we were related to the park. Okay, and this one involves the Willamette Greenway Trail. This is one where both we've heard from the commissioners in charge of parks and transportation. It's about improving the Willamette Greenway Trail to reduce conflicts, user conflicts, improve access, et cetera, and access to the river and to within the trail area. This one, we recommend that both bureaus be co-leads because there are portions of our Willamette Greenway Trail that are not within the park itself and that are in the right-of-way. Examples would be around Centennial Mills and also around 4th and Carruthers in the Southeast District. And then the last one is 69, which is one that we are now, if you look at the amendment sheet that was handed out today, it's item G. And after further review and discussion with both Office of Transportation staff and park staff, we realized that, and looking at this plan, that this action is covered by a central citywide action, WR1, and also another Old Town, Chinatown transportation action, TR4. So we feel that this TR5 is no longer necessary. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, so it's 60, the number 69 is no longer necessary, right?
Correct.
Because it's been encompassed in the action that we took in G. Okay. Okay, so first we want to see on these other four, do you want to unbundle those or take them as a group? Let's see.
18, 24, 57, and 69, are those the four?
18, 22, 24, and 57,
Right.
right?
No, so yes.
If I might just speak to them?
Sure.
I recognize that the Waterfront Park Master Plan was something that the community was very much wanting to get done within 2 to 5 years. We don't have the funding to do so within the 5-year plan for Portland Parks and Recreation. And even if we did, the problem is we have a master plan that we haven't implemented. The problem is we don't have the money to implement the current plan, never mind a new plan. So it's really important to me to be clear about what we're promising, and we have to look citywide at where we're putting our parks resources. Yes, I understand that if the folks who are involved in this planning process have one parks project that they'd like to do, the Waterfront Park Master Plan would be their top priority, it sounds like. I have to look citywide. We have 13 parks in East Portland that don't have any master plan, and funding for just 2 or 3 of those to get a master plan. And so we're not going to be able to get to this in the time frame that was requested in the plan.
So could I better understand, Debbie, your staff's view on this? And I recognize that Waterfront Park serves the whole city. And so this is a citywide issue, and we can debate whether it's also an equity issue, but it ultimately is a funding issue. And since we are trying not to commit to things that we can't fund, how do you reconcile the more aggressive timeline that you're recommending with Commissioner Fritz's concern about the resources to implement it?
Well, if I could jump in, I think the Waterfront Park and its improvement and its potential role, current and potential role in the life of the central city or the West Quad was a major topic of discussion. I think it's fair to say that people latched on to updating the plan as a way to start action, but the commissioners is right. We do have a plan and haven't been able to implement it. So even more aggressively seeking to, in the spirit of the SAC, where this recommendation came from, either through incrementally or just or in pieces, improvements to the waterfront park consistent with the current plan, I think would have met the intent of this community advisor, the stakeholder advisory committee as well. So it's not they latched on to doing the plan as a way to cause action. If there were other ways to cause action to move forward, to start to see improvements and increase the utilization of the park, that was really, I think, the desire, that would be also consistent. So I don't know that it would be, their recommendation was redo the plan. I don't think that that was necessarily informed by an inherent belief in the inadequacy of the current plan. You know, I don't think they got into it that deeply, but they felt action in the park and improvements to the park was an important part, and sooner better than later.
Mayor, Parks Director Mike Abate is here. Could I ask him to come forward and just give his perspective?
Sure. All right, Mike.
Thank you, Commissioner, Mayor. I think actually Joe said it quite well. There is a master plan for Waterfront Park that was completed in 2002 with action items beginning in 2003, and it hasn't been implemented. And so many of the ideas I think that drove that plan 10 years ago are still current. For example, creating better access to the river, paving some surfaces so that we could hold support events with minimal impact. A number of the ideas, lowering the seawall, creating closer access to the river, all of those things are in the plan. There's just never been follow through in terms of funding implementation.
So the reverse question I guess I would ask you, because I understand the Parks Bureau's perspective on this, but Waterfront Park affects a lot of entities other than just the Parks Bureau. So what's the harm in updating the plan, even if we haven't implemented a lot of it?
I don't know that there's harm. I mean, it would be an expenditure, Mr. Mayor. I think those interests had input into this plan, the plan that was done in 2002, and even going back and checking to see, as Joe said, is there inherent belief that there's some shortcomings in the current plan?
Mike, what would it cost to update this plan, ballpark?
Well, I think it's probably $250,000, $300,000. I mean, it's a major effort, primarily because of its interest, its significance in the city, the number of folks that would want to have a say.
So the two issues that often come up around master plans and parks, one is the cost, and two is the bandwidth issue. And you've got a lot of other things in the queue. Which is a more significant, if money was not an issue, if the mayor announced that he's going to fund it out of one-time money, what's the bandwidth issue for you?
Well, Commissioner, if funding is meant to include the staff required to develop a plan.
Take money out of it for a second, just
Right.
so we have a sense about the capacity question falling on your shoulders.
If there were no additional funds and we were asked to take this on, it's a very major effort, which would mean that we would have to postpone some planning efforts that we currently have underway.
And if you got the funding, a supplemental funding for this project in the next 5 years, does that change the equation?
Certainly, yes, because we would be able to hire the staff that could run contracts.
But we would still be at the same place in the end, that we wouldn't have the money to implement the plan.
Well, that's often the case with master plans. I guess I'm troubled by that at a level that I want to get them all done. But I'm troubled by waiting much longer to update this plan personally, because I think I see other things happening in other, either in other bureaus or by other ventures. I believe we're going to build the James Beard Public Market in the next 5 years. In fact, less than that, if the people in the room have their way. I think we might implement parts of the city's bike plan, particularly the part that affects Nadeau Parkway, sooner rather than later. So therefore, having this plan updated to reflect those changes or to be congruent with the increased likelihood of those changes, to me, seems like planning work we ought to do. This year, maybe, soon, I hope. I think it's waiting 6 or 8 or 10 years to update the plan troubles me as just too long, given how dynamic this part of the city appears that it's going to be in the near term.
We haven't yet heard the inner southeast quadrant plan, where there's a huge need for parks planning. We know of our problems in East Portland. If there was going to be $300,000 of one-time money, I would actually put it towards fixing the Charles Jordan Community Center roof, which we've been sued because it's leaking so badly that people slip on the slippery floor, rather than doing another planning process where we don't have any foreseeable way to pay for the improvements.
I don't know if any foreseeable is quite as bad as it is. So I hear you, but I understand the concern, but I think this is an area, my personal opinion, where we need to be ready for change. So, okay, others in this package that we want to discuss? Other individual items? Okay, and now is it? No, we haven't put these on the table yet, so.
Actually, Mayor, I have a question, which is, does it make no logical sense to divide these up at all, or could one draw some distinctions? Because, for example, it seems like on item 24, there's a timing issue, but there's also an issue of whether instead of improve habitat by strategically incorporating native plants and trees in Tomahawk Waterfront Park, we add the words "and along the Willamette." And it seems to me that that's a slightly different question than the timing issue, but I could be wrong.
Yes. Part of this is I don't think we need to vote at the very end on all of these as a package. You could pull one out and say, well, I agree with these two, but I want this one separated out when you're at the very end. But we wanted to package them together, especially for discussion by members of the public being able to come in and talk to several at one point.
And given that many of these amendments, certainly the dozens that I put on, were only announced last week, it seems unreasonable to expect that we're going to be able to vote at the end of today's session anyway, that we may want.
Well, remember, this is a resolution. I mean, this guides future planning work. We're not adopting code or capital plans here. We're adopting a resolution that's giving people instructions for the work they're going to do. So
Yes, and I want
I'm
to
hoping
make
we
sure
do
that
vote
I've
today.
had time to fully digest all of the information that I've heard and make sure that everything is, the i's and t's are crossed. For instance, I just noticed 21, which was not marked for discussion, was our proposal, instead of doing the waterfront park master plan, to develop a plan to improve the Hawthorne Bowl area waterfront park. So I think both staff and our offices are going to want to make sure that whatever outcomes we get to close to the end of today, we then come back and make sure that they all fit together properly.
Okay, well, let's take that question up later, but for now, you're recommending that we first see if there's support for the package, and then unbundle any pieces of it after that?
Yes,
Okay.
and I'd reiterate what I think you were saying, Mayor, which is we are absolutely sure that there are things in the northeast quadrant plan that you adopted, for example, that you were pretty sure of, that's changed because now we've learned about this. And when we get to the southeast quadrant plan, I'm absolutely sure, even if we voted next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now, there will be items. It's very iterative. And that's why we're bringing it all back together. The sooner we can move on, I think, I don't want to be messy about it, but I feel like we've been pretty specific in marching through it.
Yeah, it's not comp plan language, and it's not code.
It's not code yet.
So it's instructions to the Bureau. We can be close. Okay, is there a motion to adopt this package, or to put this package on the table?
Well, it's for discussion because I want to hear what the community has to say. Yes, so moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to.
Call that package C.
Yep, package C. Package D is the Greenway Trail.
Package D is Bridgehead Heights.
What number is that?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was 57.
Correct.
Right,
Number 40.
yeah, Bridgehead Heights, number 40.
And this one is focused primarily on the Morrison Bridgehead and the Hawthorne Bridgehead, and consideration of, those were the two locations where increases over the current height limits were proposed at Morrison to support greater activity and actually development flexibility and feasibility for an important but a tough site. And it's also the site of the public market. And in Hawthorne's case, it was, again, to provide development flexibility for an area where we have pretty high floor area ratios already, and it also coincidentally is the location of the proposed Multnomah County Courthouse that needs some height as well.
And just to clarify, what I should have stated was that I'm just proposing to keep the 75-foot on NATO Parkway. The height increases behind there are not troubling to me. It's just the 75 feet around the off-ramps.
So Joe, I have a couple questions. On the proposed courthouse, the county has said they might need to go as high as what?
Well, we may be, 280 is the latest we've heard. We prepared this recommendation on some older information that was 250 is what they were thinking. 280 is what we've heard most recently. They may be prepared to testify today, but.
Okay. And again, the staff recommendation is to not lower the heights in these two bridgeheads.
Yeah.
So it is,
Tell me again why you proposed 325 for the Hawthorne Bridgehead anyway, if they only need 280 even?
Well, the Hawthorne Bridgehead already today has pretty high floor area ratios, up to 12-to-1 with a bonus. And in that kind of, and they're relatively, some are large floor plates, some are small floor plates. What you're trying to do is give the envelope of the building some flexibility so it actually can fit in there successfully. The kind of program that's allowed by the FAR, even for the courthouse, has a difficulty fitting in the height envelope that those particular parcels have, because it's actually a little bit of a constrained parcel. So because of the FARs, because of the kind of closeness of what amounts to it's a office core to the riverfront, and the fact that most of this area, this particular bridgehead, will be developed for commercial uses, not residential uses, we thought additional height was warranted.
Okay, any more questions about this before we see if there's support to keep it in the package or put it in the package? So is there a motion on number 40?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Oh, for heaven's sake.
don't hear a
We're
second
supposed
on
to be
that.
having a public hearing and a discussion.
No, I don't. I think we've had the lack of a second, Commissioner, so that one's not in the package. So let's move on to what we'll now call Package E, which is just number 43, right?
Number 43, this is another height-related amendment. Again, for basically the Pearl District waterfront that includes Centennial Mill, number 43, or the staff proposal was to increase allowable heights up to 250 feet from today's height of 175, and to make the ability to access that additional height only achievable through an exchange for enhanced greenway dedication. This is it's a relatively narrow site, and actually it's pretty challenged site, honestly. And the public access to the greenway there is critically important, and in a lot of our plans as a great sort of opportunity for public access to the river. So if we can open up additional height that allows greater flexibility in the design and arrangement of buildings on this site, and use that as a way to, in exchange, get a wider or enhanced greenway, that was the thinking behind staff and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee in supporting increased height in this particular location.
Carla, can I ask you a question? This is the first time I remember where we've been able to look at a PowerPoint and also see someone testify. Is that a new technology breakthrough?
Yeah, it's the new PCM guy, David. He's doing that.
Well, let's acknowledge that, because what often
Right.
happens is you can't see the person testifying, and now we can actually do both. So
Impressive.
just remember, you're now on camera, Joe, when we're doing the PowerPoint.
Thank you for that warning.
You can put a little piece of tape over the, so the language there crosses out the words "or provision of greenway enhancements." But is that because we're not any longer going to consider greenway enhancements, or because they're otherwise covered?
It's because I thought the discussion that we had last time was talking about affordable housing as the
Right.
main reason for doing bonuses, and preservation historic resources a secondary one. To me, the greenway issues are not related, should not be related to the height bonuses.
Okay. Well, square this for me. Help me with some of my own confusion here with item A in our supplemental packet that talks about how we're studying bonuses and transfers overall.
Yes, this does conflict with that, and in this way. The new item A is directing us to come back to you all with a sort of a economically tested and redesigned bonus system that puts priority on affordable housing, historic preservation, and public open space.
And seismic.
And seismic. So this would be a location where what we'd come back is to try to show you what potential, the feasibility, honestly, of or the likelihood of getting additional greenway improvements, public open space improvements on this particular site in exchange for height increases. I don't believe we're talking about increasing FAR here. It may be, when we bring the results back to you, that it shows it doesn't pencil, and then that would, obviate this kind of possibility. But we want to give it a run and examine it. That's the spirit of this particular recommendation.
I mean, is this not in fact diluting our bonuses? I mean, if we want to focus on affordable housing and preservation and seismic, is this amendment
Yeah, we're going.
increasing that pie?
No, it's actually, we're bringing back the results of the analysis in May. And part of what I want to be able to show the commission is these kind of trade-off, Commissioner, that you would be making. To have, our belief is To have a targeted and successful bonus system, we are going to want to eliminate a lot of the bonuses that you can get today and focus them. And what I want to be able to show you all is with a very tight, what if you just had one bonus? What are the pros and cons of that? And so it will come back as part of that discussion. And as I was just suggesting, for our purposes now, it's one we want to take a look at. I can't guarantee that it's going to work financially just because of the value of height isn't that much for what we're getting here. Or you may find that it doesn't work because you really want to devote more attention to other things. This doesn't rise above the bar as a transfer or bonus that you want to offer. This motion just leaves it on the table for that evaluation when we come back.
And also part of that is when we come back for the entire Central City Plan, I think what we want to be able to do is put the 3 or 4 a key potential bonus and have you have that real discussion about which one is most important that you really want to focus on. Do you want to just have that? Do you want to have a point system like some cities have where if affordable housing is the most important, it gets more points per se than the Greenway or something else. And those are hard decisions that in the past we've just kind of threw them all in there and said they were all equal, and that wasn't a good way to do it.
Yeah, that's what I want to avoid.
Okay.
So, and your recommendation is to approve this amendment as it is before us, right?
Correct. And then we'll revisit it.
Are we on 42 or
43?
43?
43.
And Commissioner Fritz, what is your position on the BPS recommendation to this amendment?
I would take it out, but
Wait, I'm sorry, we are on waterfront, both.
42 and 43.
42 and 43? So Commissioner Fritz, you're the sponsor of this. Do you feel you have clarity about what staff has said, or is this still?
I am really, if you look at your book, the front of your book, I am really troubled at the height increases all along the waterfront. And you can see at the Morrison Bridgehead how currently there isn't a couple of 2 thumbs sticking up. So I'm concerned in the Pearl District also about having very high buildings next to the Greenway and making it very difficult to do a step down to the river.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to understand the difference between your amendment and their commentary. What's the?
Their commentary keeps in the possibility of allowing more height in response to the Greenway bonus. Well, admittedly, we do need more money for the Greenway because we're not getting system development charges from Old Town Chinatown, but I don't think that the two are not congruent. The height should be for something that benefits that particular property, not that particular area, and it should be for affordable housing or historic preservation, and that's it.
But that's what they have here.
No, they're proposing to do seismic upgrades and public accessible open space.
The 42 is really focused on a different part of the Pearl District, although it could conceivably apply to the Pearl waterfront. But if you remember in the plan, the sort of the southern part of the Pearl, we have a proposal to increase heights up to 250 feet from a variety of heights now, but let's say 175. And the only way to get to that height in the southern part of the Pearl is by transfer from a historic property, or it could be also commissioner. That's what the Stakeholder Advisory Committee requested that we focus on. But it also could be the affordable housing bonus, and we'll bring that package back that you can consider it. But what the Pearl District Association and our stakeholders were interested in is finding a way to preserve the smaller buildings that are part of the character of the Pearl. And so the commissioner in 42, Commissioner Fritz's a proposed amendment is consistent with that point of view. It just sort of makes it clear. And so for that one, I believe we're supporting 42. And on 43, it's about increasing the heights. And you can see that in this area around the 13th Avenue Historic District, that language is still in, and the language that's struck for a height increase is along the waterfront. So I know it's a little confusing, I apologize, because we put the two together, but the height decrease here, or the height increase that is the subject for the proposed amendment is just the Pearl District waterfront height increase.
Mayor, I'm having trouble tracking this. And we have lots more amendments to get
Yeah.
through. Would you object to me just can I just second this so we can
Want
have
to take
it?
them one at a time, maybe, do 42 and then 43? Is there a difference?
42 sounds like we're okay.
So is there a
So-
motion for 42? Somebody make a motion if you like it.
I'll move 42.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, so that one's in. Now, 43, what do you want to do there?
What's your pleasure, Commissioner Fritz?
I don't understand why the Bureau is supporting what I'm proposing on 42 and not supporting it on 43.
So I will
and then
second,
proposing-
the amendment so that it's open for discussion, Mayor, because perhaps there's someone here who's going to testify and give us a
Okay.
perspective on that.
All right,
But I think,
there was a
We've
motion
reached
for
the-
43,
so I second the 43.
but I don't think there was a motion. Did somebody?
I put it on the
You ma-
table.
Oh, you did, I'm sorry.
He moved it, I
You
seconded
moved
it.
it, he seconded it, okay, so that one's in as well.
And what is that? Is that E?
43, 42 and 43 constitute E.
And then A is done as well at this spot.
We have to separately, we'll get to, we still have to separately adopt A? Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Now, we still have F, which is 45 and 46.
Okay, 45 and 46 refer to the required residential overlay in Goose Hollow. It is an overlay that requires on land that's base zone is CX, residential development to be built as part of the development of any commercial development on the property. And there's two sort of different amendments that apply to this. And if you can see the PowerPoint, the area that's sort of the north end, of the northeast end of Goose Hollow, where there's a concentration of CX zoning, we're recommending removing the required residential overlay. The required residential overlay was adopted at a time when I think we didn't really know how development was going to perform in the central city vis-a-vis would residential be developed. We wanted residential. We thought one way to get it is to require it. What happened, what we've learned is that our mixed-use zones are actually producing a good deal of residential, and they're producing a good deal of commercial. Sometimes it's mixed, and sometimes it's not, and most often it's not. But both the CX zone, the EX zone, and the Pearl, they allow residential to be built, they allow commercial to be built, and you're able to see both happen, and you end up with a mixed-use neighborhood. The overlay that requires it to be on the same site in the same building has proved to be an impediment to ever seeing commercial buildings be developed individually without a residential component as part of the mix. And so there's a belief that came through that the Stakeholder Advisory Committee in our analysis convinced us of, that we can still get a mixed-use district and remove this impediment to sites that really could be more successful as just a sole commercial building if we leave the zoning but remove the required residential overlay. The way to think about this is this overlay applies to sites, for instance, that front onto Burnside. One could get a commercial building on Burnside. One could start to see new investment of a significant degree over there that could buoy the district and start a change and start to move us on a path of increased development in there. But it doesn't preclude also the inherent attractiveness of the central city and of Goose Hollow for a standalone residential building as well. Another good example is the Artist Rep Theater. Artist Rep Theater wants to expand. That's a commercial use, not a residential use. And so it's created this unnecessary impediment. We're not giving up on the goal of mixed use. We're just thinking that the overlay is not the best way to get there. And then there's a second site, the one that's over to the west, the smaller of these two circles.
Subject to 46. right?
46. And the discussion there is similar but different. This is largely a surface parking lot, I believe, and that the concern that the required residential overlay requirement here was seeking to address was to prevent the development of a standalone parking garage that possibly could serve Multnomah or the athletic club. So The required residential overlay is one way to do that. There may be other ways to do that, though, that don't, that just go more directly at the matter of maybe not allowing standalone parking structures. They have to be part of a development that's got other uses in it. So that's, I believe, what we're proposing to go explore and bring back to the City Council tools that accomplish that end and not depend on the residential overlay to do that.
How does removing the residential requirement comply with our current comprehensive plan policy of no net loss of housing?
There's two no net loss of housing policies. One is the affordable housing no net loss, and that's not the one you're referring to. It's the citywide no net loss of housing policy. In the proposed comprehensive plan, we are not continuing that policy because not the affordable housing no net loss. There's a mandate that you can't change zoning out in the neighborhoods from one zone to another. The no net loss of housing policy that I believe you're referring to, Commissioner, is it comes from Metro. It doesn't count our mixed-use zone as a legitimate way to provide residential development. And when we look at the track record, our mixed-use zones are producing a ton of residential development. So we don't believe that we still need that policy in that form. That's sort of the argument I'm trying to make here with the CX. When you look at how these areas are developed in the central city, these are producing mixed-use development. They're just not necessarily forcing it to be both commercial and residential development on one site. It'll be a residential site, a commercial site coexisting in a mixed-use neighborhood. And we've seen the volume of production, especially when you take a look at the history of the Pearl District, to be pretty substantial in both categories. So we think it's consistent with the no net loss. We think it's consistent with the goal in the comprehensive plan of producing housing and producing mixed-use neighborhoods.
So Commissioner Fish, that actually impacts one of your amendments that you have in accordance with the city's no net loss policy.
But the no net loss policy that I'm referring to applies to the inventory of deeply affordable units, and a policy that says we won't go below a certain number without replacing it. It doesn't deal with the abstract notion about where we may be developing housing in the future. It's the existing inventory of affordable housing.
So we need to, I wasn't aware that we were going to be doing away with current comprehensive plan policies in this particular part of the process. We need to have a discussion about the current comprehensive plan policy on no net loss of housing, because it applies to things like changing the industrial lands inventory. It applies to a lot of things, and I'm very concerned if you're proposing to get rid of that current policy, we need to have that discussion.
No, let me maybe make myself more clear, Commissioner. CX zoning, our central city zones are mixed-use zones. And our mixed-use zones in the central city are producing mixed-use districts, which means that even in a CX and in our EX zones, we're seeing a lot of residential development.
I understand that, but they don't have to have residential except in this area.
No, but they do. And so if we were to look at the numbers, if we were to look at the actual performance of where development is happening in the city, those zones objectively are producing residential development, supporting residential development, and producing mixed-use districts. So that's it. That's how we design that tool actually to work, and lo and behold, it is. So we think it is. It would be consistent. We could make a finding that it is consistent with the no net loss of housing in the central city. We do not think this action at all will result in a loss of housing. And what we're seeing is that it's creating an impediment to seeing any development of a significant scale on these lots.
Okay, understood.
Well, colleagues, we have received probably most of the comments on these packages of amendments have been on this particular amendment. So I would suggest that there are people here who would like to testify about it. And so I move the amendment for discussion.
Both of them, 45 and 46?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, I don't hear a second for those, so those are not on the table. So now we have remaining still these items that we have not yet adopted or accepted, right? A through G unless otherwise adopted already, right? Am I tracking?
Yeah. So we're looking at the additional amendments.
What, we're looking at the supplemental?
Are we? Yes.
Okay, so A is still marked discuss. You still believe it is needed, right?
You know, we are supportive of this amendment. We marked it for discussion just in case, you know, the city council wanted to have a deliberation of it. But the upshot of this is, I think what we've been saying all along, and when we went back and reviewed our plan, actually at the encouragement of Commissioner Fish and Commissioner Saltzman, I believe, we found that we never came out and said what's said in this policy, that we want to, or this action. We're bringing back to you all a bonus system and an analysis, and we're going to evaluate how to redo our bonus system in the central city, and we're focusing on affordability, historic, seismic, and open space. So this just clarifies that. So we're fully supportive of this action. If the city council would like to discuss it, that would be fine. If it's consent, it's okay.
Well, I guess I don't recall publicly open or publicly accessible open space being one of the things that we were discussing in the spirit of narrowing the focus of our bonuses. I mean, I think affordable housing, seismic, and historic preservation were what I had in mind.
Okay.
So I guess if I,
Yeah, where did that come from? Frankly, I don't.
You know, it's sort of been, it
It came from the Stakeholder Advisory Committee.
came from the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. It's a current sort of bonus that we have in the kind of thing, but I think what we're discovering too is it's going to be one that's really economically challenging to make work in any substantial size. Open space transfers, like we did for Director Park, that's, you know, a different animal, but even though it's in our consideration, it's in our study now, Commissioner, we may not make it forward, so.
Well, you're studying, make sure I'm saying this correctly, you're studying all of our existing bonuses and transfers with regard to their effectiveness and their utilization. The question that this language poses is, what are we saying we really want to prioritize in the future, right?
And part of it also is that this kind of statement is something we want to have for all the quadrants. And so the open space was a really big deal for the northeast quadrant, northeast that you already passed. And so we need to have this kind of policy be one that's overriding for all,
So can I
the entire central
Can I
city.
seek a clarification on this?
Sure.
Because my guess is that there's a number of us that were in the mix would be arguing at the appropriate time to give it lesser weight than
Right.
something else. So this sounds like something that can be corrected through the point system. It sounds like you're saying this is something you want to assess as to whether it's a viable bonus. But I think you're likely to hear from us that we want to narrow the range of bonus linkages and give higher priority to affordable housing. So are we talking, is there any daylight between us, or can we
No, I think
reconcile
that's
both?
exactly what we're saying too, Commissioner. So we're going to bring them, it's just out of,
You want to study it, but we
And bring
still
it back.
we still get the final determination.
And
of
we're
what
not
the priority
changing
is.
policy on the spot right here. We're giving you, just like the rest of this, we're giving you instructions about how you're going to do the work, right?
exactly right. And, you know, this particular instruction is really helpful to us because we have 20-some bonuses now, so you're signaling that we can focus it in, and that's the direction we had hoped to go
Yeah.
for a more
Okay.
effective system.
All right, that helps, because I agree with you, Commissioner Fish. I don't have a high regard for this particular bonus provision, but I'm trusting that they're going to do this analysis and come back to us, so I'm okay with the language in front of us, but not that that's how we'll weight them when it comes to actual change in what we give bonuses for.
So based on this discussion, I don't see any need to discuss this further. And just, this, I think.
Right, we don't need to adopt this, right? You're going to do the study anyway, or should we go ahead and adopt this in your opinion?
You could add it to the consent.
Consent A.
Okay. All right, so is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Is there a second? All right, so A is added then. Okay. B, right? I'll take up B, housing affordability.
Inexplicable to me why you want to discuss this, Joe. Without
Other than
regard
to
the
affirm its
sponsor of the
importance.
amendment.
And
Part of this is that we checked all the new ones that we got in the past 24 hours or so.
Yeah.
And that's why they have check marks on all of them, because we didn't have a chance to check in with everybody. So
So this one has
so
been.
some of these may be ones you want to just,
Just to be clear, this simply aligns what you're doing with what Commissioner Saltzman is doing with the Portland Housing Bureau, which is taking a look at no net loss and other policies. He'll be coming to council in April. I've shared this amendment with him and cleared it with his office. The idea here is to make sure we're salting in your work and putting a placeholder what he's doing so that the no net loss policy consideration is part of the West Comp Plan. And ultimately, it's about getting to a point of good annual data of the inventory and a commitment as to what we do if we fall short and have an obligation to replace it. Commissioner Saltzman's moving forward at the Housing Bureau already to address this. My amendment bakes this into the comp plan, so they're aligned.
Okay, so is that a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so that one is, B is approved for our consideration today as well. C, we've done by consent. D is checked for discuss as well.
D and E, yeah, E are
E.
pretty related. They're about the Morrison Bridgehead ramp reconfiguration and also assessment of freight movements and issues on NATO. Morrison
Current
Bridge.
language is what's proposed to be deleted there, right?
Correct. So we would sort of stop with our consideration of the Morrison Bridgehead ramps, and then on the E, we would incorporate a study. We would sort of, I believe this may be just moving it out. It actually, we support this E. It's just saying, look at it, the system for both the east side and the west side, and come back with sort of an understanding of freight performance and impacts on NATO Parkway.
Joe, we had, remind me on this, but I believe we had testimony from Debbie Kitchen and others expressing concern about this, not just the potential cost and other, but the impact on circulation, the impact on the Central East Side ultimately. So could you address her concern and what you're recommending we do?
Well, you know, in this, it's a proposal from Peabody and Commissioner Fritz's office. The concern about, especially the north ramp of the Morrison Bridgehead ramp, is come out clearly in the southeast quadrant and the west quadrant. It's a major sort of access way for the industrial district on the east side to get to the I-5. Peabody has done, and I believe Mauricio Leclerc is with us today, who has been working on this, did a preliminary analysis of that and found that, as we all suspected, there's some significant issues, potential impacts with the northbound reconfiguration of northbound ramps, less so with the reconfiguration of, or the north side ramp, less so with the southern ramp that would take you back east. But that reconfiguration actually had some interesting aspects, even because reconfiguration of those ramps doesn't necessarily mean elimination of the ramps. It's reconfigure. It's just expensive. And it's a little bit in the spirit of, is this something, and who would want to be tackling this now? But if private development was to bring forward a proposal about that included reconfiguration, we wanted to be sort of in a position to at least entertain that and assess it.
So I'm now confused, Commissioner Novick. Is this a transportation issue or development issue?
I think it's both. From, as Mr. Zender just said, I mean, from PBOT's perspective, we understand there are potential difficulties with it, but we've looked at it before. If somebody comes forward with a proposal, then we're willing to further study it. So we don't have a problem with maintaining the possibility of studying the option.
But this is saying that you are going to in the next 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, we already are, so
Yeah, I think, I mean, it doesn't say we're going to devote half our resources to doing it, but I think that we anticipate that there will be a proposal that's worth studying in the next 2 to 5 years.
Okay, So Commissioner Fritz, I think you put this one before us. If you want to keep this one in the package, you'll need to make a motion and see if there's a second.
We
Yeah.
on D?
On D,
Yes,
on
Commissioner.
D, right?
I think I won't bother, but what I will do is, what I went to get was my current comprehensive plan, which states in policy 4.8, maintain housing potential. Maintain housing potential by requiring no net loss of land reserved for or committed to residential or mixed use. When considering requests for amendments to the comprehensive plan map, require that any loss of potential housing units be replaced. So I would expect there to be some consideration, since the comprehensive plan is a guiding document for the council, which was adopted, that we should continue to entertain testimony on that. But I withdraw this other one.
Okay, and you want to withdraw E as well?
E's on, no, you don't want me to withdraw E, it's already on there.
We had
not
it
proposing to
marked
delete that.
discuss, sorry.
Well, it's discussed because it's new. I just wanted to make sure we're brought to your attention. We're supportive of E.
Okay.
It's something that we should be doing and supportive of that timeframe as well. And PBOT was with us in that support.
Okay, so is there a motion on E?
So this has
This is
support.
to leave it on consent.
Consent.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had it, I didn't have it marked as consent.
Right, no, it, actually, this, we marked it to discuss because we wanted to draw your attention to it, but the answer is we support it, and it'd be great if the city council supports it, just to put it on the consent.
So I'm confused. We need to take any action to do what you just recommended?
Yes, because of the way we adopted the
Okay,
consent.
so then
'cause
I
it
need a
had
motion
check.
to add it to the package, right?
You got it,
Package
thank
A.
you.
Okay. Yes, so
Second.
E, there's a motion for E in a second? Did I hear that? Did I hear both? I heard a second, I think. Oh, and it's moved in second. All right, in the package. Bear with me. I'm just trying to maintain order in my own mind and everywhere else. Okay, now we are at the point, I believe, because F and G were both consent items and therefore already included, where we have acted one way or another on all of the printed amendment proposals, either the ones that were already marked for consent that we've approved or that we've discussed and either approved or not approved. Now it's time, I believe, to see if there are any other amendments that council members want to propose before we open the public hearing on the amendments that are before us. Okay?
So, Mayor, this has been an unusually efficient process getting to this point.
Hope so.
Without putting our talented team on the spot, might it be useful just to identify what is now before the public? And just have a list so that we have your list?
I think it would be, if they can manage
Take the
that.
consent, all the consent stuff is off, so
Right, so
what's
what's
left for
left?
discussion for purposes of a
I
hearing
think we
today?
put those into packages, so it was package B, C, D.
You could do package and the numbers within each package.
Right, so package B, I'll do this and you guys track along with me and see if I've got it right. Package B, which includes amendments 7 through 11,
Correct.
is before us. Package C, right, which ones
Yes.
of those did
And
we?
that's 28, 24, and 22, and 57.
24, 28,
That's,
Oh, 18, sorry.
sorry.
I believe it's 18, 22,
20,
18, 22, 24, and 57. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Correct. Correct?
Amazing, since I'm enumerate. 18, 22, 24, and 57.
57, right. Okay.
The next is the Pearl District waterfront, so we had 42 and 43?
No, those weren't.
43.
Okay.
43.
43 was adopted, right. Okay?
And then on the additional sheet, find that.
Yes, on the additional
On
sheets.
the additional sheet, we want to talk about,
We put it on consent.
we put everything on consent, except for D.
D was withdrawn.
D was withdrawn, so the rest are consent, I believe.
Okay? Is that helpful? All right.
So 7 through 11 18, 22, 24, 57, and 43. Are
Correct.
those is that the universe that's before the public right now?
Yes.
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 Okay, so again, for those who are here to testify, that's important. Appreciate that, Commissioner Fish. We're going to, in a moment, we're going to open a public hearing, but it is on those amendments and only on those amendments. We did have a 3.5-hour hearing on the larger issues involved in this plan, and it's our intention to take testimony on the amendments before us and not revisit all the earlier issues. So I know we gave people a chance to sign up for particular amendments. If you didn't get a chance to do that, you still can. With Carla, again, on those items, we'll take them in order. I think it makes sense to adopt those or to hear testimony on those as we go along, and then the council can decide whether we want to wait till the end to take final action or not. So, are you ready for that process, Carla?
Yeah, was that all the amendments from staff, from council?
Yes, so we're going to open public testimony. How many people do we have signed up all told?
I believe it's 38.
38. We'd like to ask you to try to keep your comments to 2 minutes, just so we can hear everyone. As always, we try to hear everyone in this chamber and hear them courteously, so please, if you agree with your fellow citizen and want to demonstrate, so give them a thumbs up or a wave, but let's not have verbal demonstrations while we're listening to people. And we'll call people in order on the first group, which is amendments 7 through 11.
Okay, everybody has signed up with their amendment number by their name.
Oh,
So, like the first person, Daniel Kevin, you signed up for 44?
all right, well, let's, do we want to take a recess and let you resort
Let's do
those?
that. If we do that.
Let's take a 10-minute recess, give Carl the chance to sort those by amendment package, and we can do that in order.
Hold on just a second. 1 second.
ready? Okay. We have to be ready.
Oh? Really?
All right.
Yep. Get it.
Hey there.
Get it.
Do is take testimony on the packages that we just considered to try to keep this coherent for both the council and for those that are here to speak and for anybody that's following this complicated process. So we're going to take testimony on the first package, which are amendments 7 through 11.
Okay, and I have two people off the list who signed up for those, Roger Leachman and Bob Solinger.
Okay, come on up. And
Bob, you can never claim again in the future that you weren't bumped to the head of the line.
There's a first for everything.
Bob, you're representing an organization.
I just want to say before you start, I did not sign up for 7. I signed up for the amendments that Ms. Fritz put up regarding Goose Hollow, which got turned down.
Okay, thank you. So Bob, you're here representing an organization. If you need a little extra time, we'll provide that. So go ahead.
No, actually, I'll be very brief today. My name is Bob Solinger. I'm here representing the Audubon Society of Portland. I'll just say, first of all, from a habitat perspective, wildlife perspective, I think this plan has come an incredible distance since it was first presented to the Planning Commission. Staff and Planning Commission and Council, I think, have done a really good job of filling in the blanks on the environment that were there. So we're very pleased with where this has gone. We support Amendment 7 through 11. And I think it's very exciting that we're talking about some front-loaded actions on the river, especially Commissioner Fritz. We really appreciate your work in this area. So we support all of these. We think the combination of the staff recommendations and Commissioner Fritz's recommendations are good here, and I encourage you to support them. So
Just to clarify, you support the staff amendments to my amendments?
As far as yes, I think to me they seemed non-controversial. The intent is still there as far as I read them. Would you agree with that on these? Do you see any
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no, I think they're fine. On number 7, we'd like to see the 5 sites actually listed as part of the policy as well, but those are minor quibbles. So I think what's here is sufficient and will really move us forward. So
Thank you very much. Appreciate your help on developing those ideas too. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, anyone else would like to speak on items 7 through 11? In which case, let's move on to the second package, which is 18, 22, 24, and 57.
Okay, the first 3 names I have are Peter Wilcox, Chris Jaworski, and Willie Levinson. I have 2 more after these gentlemen.
Okay.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, commissioners. Good to be here. So
Peter, put your name in the record.
Peter Wilcox, live in Northeast Portland. I am also representing the Portland Waterfront Alliance, which is a ad hoc group of boat builders, boat owners, historic vessel owners, captains, including the Oregon Maritime Museum, that has been working on co-creating a different vision for the waterfront that we'll be unveiling fairly soon. And we feel like the Waterfront Park Master Plan needs to be updated in order to really take into account what's happening with the public market and also with the proposal that we'll be bringing forward and others. And I think it goes well with some of the other proposals, the dock proposals, for example, that I know we're not discussing. So I know you've talked about the master plan already. I think there's just really good reasons to update that, at least the parts that relate to the area around the Morrison Bridge and where the public market's going to be. And the park's been so underutilized for so long. We need to do more. So,
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Jaworski. I erroneously prepared 3 minutes, so perhaps I can borrow a minute from you, sir.
Okay, go ahead. We'll try.
Thank you. As a community action member of Portland's destination marketing organization, Travel Portland, I'm very interested in the region's planning and redevelopment goals, especially those elements that impact the visitor experience. My involvement stems from my previous roles as general manager of Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, as a participant in the Downtown Retail Council, and a consultant to the tourism industry. Prior to that, my graduate student work in sustainable tourism development provided me with numerous opportunities to work on projects that contributed not only to our great city, but also to our state and other destinations around the world. Representatives of the tourism industry and members of the CAC are often receive proposals for interest in development of areas such as Waterfront Park. That's why I'm here today, to share an item of concern with certain proposed amendments to the West Quadrant Plan, which are vital to tourism, retail, and entertainment. We are supportive of much of the plan, however, are concerned about amendment items number 18 related to changing the timeline from 2 to 5 years to 6 to 20. That together would delay opportunities to, 1, enhance Portland's attractiveness as a premier destination for visitors and residents alike, revitalize and improve access of Waterfront Park as one of our most vital but underdeveloped attractions. Waterfront Park and Willamette River represent signature opportunities for economic development, recreation, and human access, which you have all listed here today. It creates public-private management approaches with Waterfront Park similar to the model of the Holiday Park Partnership in the Lloyd District, and it expands the commercial options on the waterfront that may include water transit, docking, and other retail options. One of the benefits of the tourism industry is its ability to bring in outside dollars to stimulate our local economy. In 2014, the tourism industry brought in $4.6 in direct spending and supported roughly 34,000 jobs for the greater Portland region. Waterfront Park is our signature space in Portland. The importance of this cannot be overstated as Portland continues to set the pace in urban living and green development. It's of critical importance that the original timeline associated with items 18 and 23 in this plan are maintained in order to link new concepts with existing catalyst projects such as the James Beard Public Market and to maximize community access, employment, and economic benefits possible for Waterfront Park. Now, I'd like you for just a moment to imagine Pioneer Courthouse Square still a surface parking lot. Or I'd like you to imagine Seattle without Pike's Place Market. Or perhaps most impactful, imagine the city of Vancouver, BC, and if it had not committed in its entirety to Stanley Park, which, by the way, was recognized by TripAdvisor's Traveler's Choice 2014 award as the #1 urban park in the world. And of course, we all use TripAdvisor, so we can trust its source. Comparing with great places such as Central Park in New York, Millennium Park in Chicago, Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, and even places like St. James Park in London, among others, is impressive. As such, I would urge you to please consider maintaining the timelines associated with items 18 and also 23 in the Waterfront Master Plan. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input and for your consideration with regard to these proposed amendments.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Willie Levinson, Human Access Project. Wanted to say first, it was great working with BPS staff. It was actually pretty cool as first time Human Access Project has done direct advocacy to see that the plan was moved a little bit in terms of human access. This wasn't discussed. It was points 2 through 6, but it was really important changes to the plan. So hoping parks would consider as interesting dialogue between the mayor and Commissioner Fritz regarding the master plan. It's hard. I mean, on the one hand, it would be great, any money put towards creating better access to the Willamette, better relationship to the Willamette is great. On the other hand, there is a plan that's there and ready to use. And I would say that Human Access Project currently is working with the Parks Bureau to put in a plan to do humane geese mitigation. Tom McCall Bowl or Audubon's a consultant to try to increase activity because a lot of people don't like using the bowl because each goose poos 2 to 3 pounds a day. That alone will be something that might increase people's interest in using the bowl. I hate to say, I'd really like to touch on point 17 really quickly. There's a lot that was done with Habitat, and it was really cool that over half of these amendments have to do with the Willamette River, which is also very encouraging. But I am concerned about water access, human access, and how that's going to be measurable because it's kind of ambiguous. It's kind of thrown out there that we want it. I think Habitat side did a really good job of saying we want X number of linear feet of habitat restoration. At this point, it's probably hard to do that, but I'd suggested with number 17 is...
That one really isn't before us. We've already done that one. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it is. It's in the consent package.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
every neighborhood deserves access to the Willamette, and that could be an opportunity in 17 to say, you know, along with all these other things, that there should be access to the Willamette in every neighborhood. That's a decent aspiration. And just finally, in closing...
Okay, but I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I think it says that for each of the 7 West Quadrant districts, right? So, again, remember, this is just the West Quadrant plan. We can't...
Oh, yeah, it does, but I didn't see exactly in that. Maybe I misread it, but I didn't see where it says access to the water. It talks about a bunch of different things, but it does not specifically say that each part of this neighborhood, that each quadrant should have. Wouldn't that be great? What kind of a city is that? A city where each neighborhood you can walk directly to the Willamette. That's a reasonable aspiration. Okay. But in closing, sorry, I'm going long.
Sorry, go ahead, I interrupted.
Is the city of Portland really, in terms of the Willamette, I mean, every Northwest city has great access to the water. Vancouver, Victoria, Seattle, Boise, Spokane, along the Willamette, Eugene, Corvallis, Independence. Oregon City is putting a lot of money right now into doing their redevelopment of the Willamette River. Milwaukee just put in a brand new waterfront park. And now Vancouver, who a lot of times Portland loves to turn their nose up to as being behind us in Hicks, they are getting to redevelop their waterfront park. I just want to say that, I mean, this is a huge deal. I know sometimes the Superfund site might intimidate people from starting this work on the Willamette because we've talked about doing things. We've started a great foundation talking about creating a better relationship with the Willamette River. So what can we do to start? And the fact is the Superfund site is a big deal, and I'm not going to apologize for it, but the more we can get people connected to the Willamette, the easier they will have swallowing the big bill that will come with cleaning up the Willamette, because people are disconnected. So I would just encourage the council to consider small, easy ways that we can just start implementing some of these things. And Human Access Project is very excited about the idea of fundraising to do these things. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next, please.
The last two on these items are Andrew Yaden and Jason Franklin.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for your time, and again, thank you for your service to this great city. My name is Andrew Yaden. I'd like to speak briefly about some of these waterfront issues. A year ago, I had the great pleasure of leading a team of 6 graduate planning students from Portland State in developing a set of strategies to activate Tom McCall Waterfront Park, really as a regional and as a year-round amenity. And during a 6-month period, we collected over 900 public comments. It spoke to 100 different stakeholders, and we learned a couple of really key points, and they've actually been discussed a little bit today. First, Waterfront Park is not a downtown park. It is a regional park. If Pioneer Square is our living room, then Waterfront Park is our front yard. It's where people come together from all over the world. It's really the face that Portland puts on for the rest of the world to see. Excuse me. Secondly, there's a real desire for change and a momentum for change, for something to happen in the park. Mostly people just want better access both to the park and to the river, and they want something to do. My very first trip, site visit to the park, a couple from Seattle stopped me and said, "Now that we're here, what do we do?" So I want to speak to the planning process, the master planning process for Waterfront Park. I really believe it should be in that 2 to 5 year range, especially for some of the reasons that have already been talked about. It's really imperative that this happens now, or at least soon, to make sure that we can coordinate this planning process with some of the other great and exciting things that are already happening in the city, with the South Waterfront, with the James Beard Public Market coming. Sorry, I'm going over my time.
There you go.
And then I just also want to express a little bit of disappointment that there was no discussion around proposed amendment 23. I know it's not up right now, but that's about exploring management opportunities for Waterfront Park. And since a lot of discussion today revolved around a lack of funding or a lack of resources, this was something that we had recommended to the city and to BPS as an option to circumvent those lack of funding.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else want to testify on this group of amendments, proposed amendments? All right, then let's take testimony on the third tier, which is number 43.
Okay, I show 8 people signed up for this. The first 3 are Robert Wright, Deanne Mullen-Crispin, and Cal Toth.
Excuse me. Come on up. Good afternoon. Go ahead. Just pull that microphone a little closer. It'll turn. There you go.
Okay, how's that?
Yes.
I'm Deanna Mueller-Crispin, a West End resident. And excuse me if I'm a little scattered because I had comments which are written, and you will see, I believe, later on some of the other amendments. But, and I believe you packaged 42 with 43 because I have comments on both.
Is that right? I think we're working only on 43 at this point.
42 we agreed to, so 43 is the one.
Yeah, so they're both before us.
Okay. I strongly support Commissioner Fritz's amendment for zoning tools to allow height increases other than on the waterfront, only for preservation of historic properties and affordable housing. And I believe Mayor Hale's Amendment A also addresses that. 2 comments. This restriction of FAR transfers should be extended to the West End and Goose Hollow because it would be a very good thing to be more than just in the Pearl. And secondly, it's very important to specifically not allow TDR bonuses to be used next to or really even in the same block as historic buildings, because otherwise their historic value may be defeated easily. Number 43, I support Commissioner Fritz's amendment to not allow 250 height limits in the Pearl waterfront. We just heard about how important Waterfront Park was. Our waterfront is precious and should not be shrouded by 250-foot buildings. Greenway enhancements will not compensate for shadows created by 250-foot buildings. As a note, San Francisco has had 60-foot height limits on its waterfront since the 1970s, and a recent citizen initiative petition in 2013 confirmed that 60-foot limit at the waterfront and required voter approval for any future construction projects on the waterfront that exceeded the existing height limits. So I think we should follow them. And the 60-foot height limit there was adopted after it was proved by geometry that the best location for high-rise buildings are linear and serpentine, curved in mid-city lines along mass transit. This also produces the best views and hence best prices for new high-rise condos and minimizes their shade impact to public streets and parks and preserves most historic neighborhoods in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Welcome.
My name is Robert Wright. I live in the West End. I commend Commissioner Fritz for taking the initiative with proposed Amendment 43 regarding removal of the height business overlay from properties within the Northwest 13th Avenue Historic District and establish a 100-foot height limit for that historic district. Certainly, this district is part of the historic fabric of Portland and must not be overshadowed or crowded out by tall buildings. The West End of Portland and its buildings are equally historic. This has been very well documented. Yet the basic plan and the proposed amendments do not address maximum height in relation to the many historic buildings in the West End and the neighboring Goose Hollow district. This is absolutely paramount to the future of these districts. Having lived in Portland and knowing its history, the West End and now the Pearl District grew in parallel. People that lived in the West End worked over what is now in the Pearl District. So they're twinned, basically. They're not opposite, opposing each other. They grew together. And one editorial comment, in the documents from Bureau staff's rationale has been misused. Rationale, by definition, is a logical basis for a course of action. Recommendations from staff or committees are not rational, they are reasons. The basic rationale for allowing buildings above 100 feet must be documented clearly and articulated clearly and publicly discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Cal Toth, and I live in Goose Hollow. I'm a member of the GHFL board. I'm also an ordinary member of the Friends of Goose Hollow. I've been asked by the Friends of Goose Hollow president to say a few words from Friends of Goose Hollow's point of view, and I'm also expressing a few of my opinions. I'm very concerned about the height limits, bonus provisions, and bonus transfer system supported by the current draft plan. In many respects, I think many of these problems continue, especially as it relates to Goose Hollow, particularly the 25 block area east of Providence Park and a few blocks immediately west of the stadium, which were talked about earlier today. Friends of Goose Hollow strongly supports Commissioner Fritz's amendments 42 and 43, removing height bonuses over certain historic neighboring areas in the Pearl, only allowing height increases above existing levels for historic preservation and affordable housing. So we agree with this, but we'd like to see a similar amendment for Goose Hollow, which does not currently exist in the draft. Friends of Goose Hollow supported the removal of height bonuses in Goose Hollow, consistent with 80% of the GHFL members at the February 11th meeting, special meeting. We voted for height bonuses to be removed in Goose Hollow. If the council decides not to remove all height bonuses, Friends of Goose Hollow requests City Council to at least allow height increase bonuses only for historic preservation and for affordable housing. I'd like to add, Friends of Goose Hollow strongly supports Commissioner Fritz's proposed amendments 45 and 46, keeping the residential overlay in the areas east and west of Providence Park. I know you don't want to speak about that right at the moment. We believe not supporting this amendment violates the comprehensive plan, as you mentioned. and the policy of no net loss of housing. It should be looked at, and lawyers should be looking at that. The BDS claim that CX will promote residential housing in Goose Hollow is highly speculative.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, next.
Are Tracy Prince, Mark Velke, and Burton Francis.
Hi, I'm Tracy Prince. I came here to testify on 45 and 46. I'm as disappointed as it seems like Commissioner Fritz is. It's very, very upsetting to know that a lot of people came here, a lot of people had researched this and have a lot to say.
All right, and we want you to testify on the ones that are still in front of us.
I agree.
Yes.
I'm going to be testifying on number 43, but I want to point out that you've created a giant conundrum by not opening up 45 and 46, because the GHFL board approved and voted to support changing the zoning on the west side of the stadium to CX, but we only did that because it had a residential overlay. We would not support CX that does not have a residential overlay in that area. So the last go-round when I appeared in front of you and testified, I said we support that, but we don't support it without residential overlay. So now we got to go back to RH because we don't support a CX in that spot. There was no indication that that's what we stood for. So I just want you to consider if there's a way to deal with that issue, because we did not come before you last time and say we want CX with no residential. On 43, I wholeheartedly support Commissioner Fritz's call for removing bonuses from the Pearls Historic District and lowering height limits to 100, or keeping height limits at 100, and only allowing height increases for historic preservation transfers and affordable housing. These are great ideas and creative ways to preserve our incredible historic architecture. I was disappointed to see no similar protection of historic buildings in Goose Hollow or the West End. My personal opinion is to support removing bonuses in Goose Hollow, as the GHFL membership vote of 80% wanted bonuses removed. However, if bonuses are not removed, then it seems like a smart idea to allow height increases only through historic preservation and affordable housing bonuses. Finally, I want to say that I feel like our view corridors weren't protected well enough, and I'd like to see some more specific language about protecting the view from the Vista Bridge in Washington Park. And lastly, the map still does not show the current base heights, still seems to be showing bonuses as a right when they are not. If the Planning Bureau does not plan to deregulate bonuses and does not plan to treat bonuses as a giveaway, then this should be clearly stated in the West Quadrant Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mayor and Commissioners, my name is Mark Velke. I'm on the board of the Goose Hollow Foothills League, but I'm only speaking for myself today. I want to thank Commissioner Fritz for her suggestion in Amendments 42 and 43 that the Pearl receive increased heights only for historic preservation and affordable housing, and bonuses are removed in some areas. I support removing Goose Hollow's bonuses, just like 80% of the voters in the Goose Hollow Foothills League, but if that's not possible, then I encourage you to extend the idea from the Pearl to Goose Hollow, since we desperately need protection for our historic architecture. And then I'd also personally like to thank Commissioner Fritz for trying to get the Goose Hollow issues addressed today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Burton Francis for Preserve the Pearl LLC. First of all, I don't want to sound like a broken record and jump on the Commissioner Fritz fan club, but 39, yes.
Go ahead, she likes it.
39, preserving step down to the Willamette, and to the extent that you're removing bonuses only for preservation and affordable housing is outstanding, and we're very supportive of that. To the extent that this proposal seems to increase the height limit in the historic district, I'm looking at the map at the very end of this long sheet here. The map says 75 feet in the historic district, as I see it right here. The proposal is for a 100-foot height limit, and we're opposed to increasing any of the height limits in this particular area. So I'd like to point that out. And then finally, my last comment goes to the failure to address basically the height limits in general in this area, and also noting, because I was confused by this language that was from the staff about only discussing the South Pearl. I mean, I didn't understand what that meant. What is that concept? And I went back to page 171 of this big fat booklet that we got here, all right? And as late as December of 2014, the map that's shown at page 171 still distinguishes between North Pearl, which is north of Lovejoy, a middle Pearl area between Lovejoy and Hoyt, and which is distinguished on that map at 150 feet, and then south of Hoyt to Burnside, which is 175 feet. And I'm looking at the map now in this big handout, okay? And I guess what they mean by South Pearl is everything south of Lovejoy now, because that middle Pearl area no longer is reflected in this map. And I'm wondering why the amendments haven't addressed that. And my comment basically is, to the extent that this is wiping out our neighborhood, which is the middle Pearl, from Lovejoy to Hoyt, we strongly object to the failure to address that as being inconsistent with the Central City Fundamental Design Guidelines, the River District Guidelines, in terms of cherishing the uniqueness and habitability of neighborhoods.
Okay, we'll get clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, next folks on this.
43, the last two I show are Seth Johnson and Roger Leachman.
Okay, come on up. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Seth Johnson. I'm with Preserve the Pearl, and I just wanted to echo that I support lower height limits within the Pearl. I am baffled as to how we preserve the historic district with a 250-foot height limit. And I believe that the comments about San Francisco are very important. I think we can look at numerous of the cities. The gentleman earlier spoke about parks, St. James Park, and all these areas, London and Paris. He didn't mention Paris, but these are all areas that have low-rise buildings. And in terms of the Bay Area is a fantastic example, along with London and Paris, of how people considered themselves the stewards of the city. And so legislation that's been passed in those cities has helped preserve those cities for a long time. There are numerous areas in the Bay Area that would have been developed had it not been for the thoughtful conscience of the people in the past. I think it's very important that we think of these things now. I fail to understand what the hurry is to radically change the character of this area and the character that has brought people to Portland. What's about to happen is going to drive people out. There is already a somewhat of a mass defection taking place in some cases, and so how can people in the future invest in this area and know that that their investment's going to be respected? So I encourage a more thoughtful response to what's going on here, and I think we'll all do better if we slow down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Roger Leachman. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Goose Hollow Foothills League. Amendment 43 for the Pearl would only allow height increases for historic preservation and affordable housing. I support that for them because we would want that at least for Goose Hollow. The Bureau opposes this. The SAC, the Stakeholders Advisory Committee, also opposes this. Well, of course they would. After all, the Bureau chose the SAC. At the last GHFL meeting, one of those various members of the Stakeholders Advisory Committee, not a Goose Hollow resident, said, "I don't know who we will recuperate our reduced land values from if you lower height limits or remove bonuses. I don't know if it would be this GHFL board or city council." Well, you can hear the threat as well as anyone. This is what we have always dealt with in Goose Hollow. This was who was put on the SAC, whose co-chairs were both developers and whose members were chosen by the Bureau without any regard for neighborhood residency or even Portland residency. The downtown representative said conspiratorially to West Enders, "Don't tell anyone, but I don't live in Portland." Well, when you choose your own electorate, you get the results you intend. I'm from the South originally, so I know all about it. And Portland, it turns out, is no different. I think that little can surprise me anymore. I live in a city where it is the official policy of city government, acting without any legal basis through the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, to restrict and neuter the exercise of democracy in Portland's neighborhood associations, which they were founded to support. So why should the Bureau's fictions and the SAC's conflicts of interest be any more surprising? I urge a vote for this amendment.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else want to testify on those amendments? And then, does anyone want to testify on any of the ones we adopted by consent that we haven't otherwise heard testimony on? Come on up, please. I should say adopted, put on the table. I keep getting my nomenclature confused.
Hello, my name's Mary Vogel. I live in the West End and on the Land Use and Transportation Committee for the Downtown Neighborhood Association, but I'm testifying only for myself and my business plan Green today. And I also joined the Amanda Fritz fan club here in testifying. I think I'm going to focus on number 30, the one on West End trees. I had 28 Jefferson Street and 30 as kind of combined to say that at the very least for this action, Amanda's amendment is identify tree preservation and planting opportunities and implementation strategies along I-205, including vine coverage and canyon walls. I'm afraid that the city of Portland doesn't really have that much jurisdiction just along I-405, but there are places so my tweaking of that amendment is and adjoining and connecting streets for at least 2 blocks in, meaning like Jefferson and Columbia streets, for example, and certainly 13th, but also 12th Avenue and 11th Avenue and all. There are places on these streets that are totally devoid of street trees. Many of them are very low income buildings. They're not necessarily subsidized buildings. They're not all, either housing authority or HUD buildings, but they are, they have all low-income people. Anyways, I think that's a very important amendment there, and adjoining and connecting streets for at least 2 blocks in. The other thing that Amanda said in number 30 was include central citywide actions in specific districts where they are relevant, and I couldn't agree more. And in fact, one amendment that or environmental action I was able to get into both Goose Hollow and the Pearl District by going to those neighborhoods early on and testifying for the need for us to have habitat and connected habitat and all, got into their environmental actions, but not into my own neighborhood. And that was one on strategically install native vegetation and trees within the public open spaces, including the South Park blocks and streetscapes along the missing park blocks to achieve a north-south wildlife corridor. Those are probably 2 of my most important. I also had some comments on the West End surface parking lots that Amanda, or at least staff did not support, but Amanda's recommendation was continuing to explore incentives for discontinuing the development and use of surface parking lots. I suggest adding not only incentives but disincentives, and I had already submitted to the Strategic Advisory Committee and all an idea for a split rate taxation where we tax those parking lots at their development potential, not just like right now, the parking lot catty-cornered from the Indigo 12 West pays 1/43 less in taxes than 12 West does, and this seems like we're really incentivizing the wrong thing to let parking lots off with such low taxation rates. So anyway, that was another part of my suggested contributions that did not get in. In fact, we in the West End had no representative whatsoever on the Strategic Advisory Committee for the West Quad Plan.
Thank you.
Mary, thank you very much for all of your amendments, many of which I tried to get incorporated, and I appreciate that you have done a lot of work to make this plan better. I wanted to note that an incentive could be the avoidance of punishment as well as something good came to happen.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I want to get staff back up to help us walk through our action on the amendments, but also I'd actually love to ask a question about that last testimony, which is both really to you, Commissioner Fritz, and to staff, and that is, why are we being street-specific on numbers 28 and 30, now that she's called that to our attention? 28 talks about Jefferson Street with green infrastructure, and 30 talks about along I-405. I guess that's not quite as street-specific. In terms of retrofitting parts of the West Quadrant with street trees that don't yet have them, I like that idea, but so why are we focusing particularly on those two fronts?
Well, so my understanding was that's covered in the overall policies. So this 28 was just amending a proposed policy to get the language correct, and because it's the actual policies on the Jefferson Main Street rather than particularly on the.
So it's just including green infrastructure as part of what we're going to try to do in the Jefferson Main Street.
Correct.
Okay.
And not just limiting it to stormwater facilities, which doesn't sound nearly as nice as green infrastructure.
Correct.
And then 405 was a modification of a suggestion that Mary had made to try to recognize that there are some things that we could do with the freeway, and there's particular challenges with the freeway in various places, and what could we do to mitigate that?
Okay.
So we have street tree planting policies in the central citywide, but this we left in because of the 405 and that particular impact on these neighborhoods.
Okay, got it. All right. Other questions for
I have
staff?
some there, thank you. Joe, I'll try to do this in order. Can we start with Amendment 7? So there's a notation under BPS recommendation. The staff suggests listing the number of sites in the performance target rather than the policy language. And I'm prepared to agree with that, provided that we have some clarity that there'll be somewhere between 5 and 7 sites that will be identified somewhere in the process, and have you confirm that that's the intent?
I'll turn it over to Mindy.
Sure. So we've identified 7 opportunity sites, which was the map that we had up before we could flip back to it. And we're recommending that the target for 2035 to restore at least 5 of those 7.
At least 5.
At least 5.
And those sites will specifically be identified and listed in what document?
They're in Appendix C of the plan, which specifies the methodology for the enhancement and restoration strategy, and the 7 sites are identified, the opportunity sites.
Okay, so they're baked into what we have.
Yes, they're baked into what we have.
And the commitment is at least 5.
Yeah.
And what we've heard from some testimony is shooting for between 5 and 7.
Yeah, and we landed on 5 because we haven't done a feasibility study on these, and we don't know if we'll be able to do restoration at all 7 of the sites. So we think that it's reasonable to put 5 down as the target and then get into some feasibility work.
I believe you said at least 5.
At least 5. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to move to 18, 22, 24. I just want to, without beating a dead horse, Joe, I do think this park is a regional park. It has significance to the whole community. But the concern I have from the commissioner in charge has to do with timing and funding. And also the value of doing a planning process if there aren't resources to implement it. So is that a fair characterization?
Yes, of what Commissioner Fritz is saying, you mean? Yes.
And it is, when this issue has come up in the past about action items and priorities and stuff, what we're essentially saying as a council, were we to adopt those, that it would be a council priority to find a way to fund them. Council setting a timeline, and so it'd be a council responsibility for determining a method for funding the study. I mean, I think I'm stating it rhetorically, but I just want you to affirm that, if that's the council decision.
Yes, I mean, there's an implementation of the waterfront park plan sort of notion here. That's, we sort of need an implementation plan as well as, in this particular recommendation and update, both of those have this follow-up from City Council to empower that to happen. It is implied in that.
Well, it's always been implied. Only in the East Portland Action Plan have we ever gone back and tracked and checked things off. So we need to be having a citywide discussion, because I think everybody who testified today and most people that I've heard from have been folks who live or work downtown or have development interests. I would be very interested to hear from the East Portland Action Plan folks if they support dedicating money and money both for the planning process and for implementation of improvements at Waterfront Park over any other use that might be that we might be able to put that money to.
Yeah, but there's a problem with that approach, Commissioner, because I happen to support both. I happen to applaud your equity agenda and have supported all the funding requests you've made, because I think we should do it. But I don't think we should at the same time not proceed with investing in parks that serve a regional function. I think we have to do both, and I think I don't think asking East Portland Action Plan to prioritize either is fair to them. I think we should double our investment in East Portland, and you are doing that with SDCs and asks and everything else. But we also have things called regional parks. It would be like saying we're not going to make any marginal investments in Forest Park because of its geography. I would say, as your ally in this, let's find the resources to do both. And I hear your concern that you have prioritized addressing a deficit, and when we're adding something to your your list that is not funded and may not happen, I understand there's a conflict. But it would seem to me that the way you resolve that isn't to either degrade your equity agenda or not proceed with a historic opportunity to upgrade a regional park, but to commit to having the resources to do both.
In a perfect world with all the money that's available, then yes, of course we would do both. But we don't have that. We have Forest Park, whose management plan was done in 1995, before downtown, the Waterfront Park, that also could use another fresh look. We've been presented with this one as an ask in this particular plan, but we don't have the information to say whether or not this is the priority when you look at all of the parks needs citywide, when you look at all of the regional needs citywide.
Fair point. So I'm going through my questions, and then we'll have a council discussion. Joe, could we go to 43 for a second?
Yes.
What I heard from the testimony is broad support for that portion of the amendment that sets a 100-foot height limit. So I guess that's been resolved in the historic area, but some concerns about the the bonus linkage. And could you again walk us through why we want to have the bonus linked to something more than preservation of affordable housing?
So this one's a little confusing because of the way we've divided it up here, but remember, there's two areas in the Pearl District where we're talking about height increases. There's the area that sort of surrounds the 13th Avenue Historic District. Now, I called it the South Pearl, Mid Pearl is apt as well. And the notion there is greater heights, but only accessible through benefit to historic or smaller properties in the Pearl to preserve those. City Council's also made it clear by Action A in the new list that the provision of affordable housing needs to be considered in that whole package, and we're going to bring that whole package back. So that's one sort of situation. The community has supported, or parts of the community, the Pearl District Neighborhood Association supports that tactic applied here, especially focusing on the historic and character buildings. The waterfront is the one place where we've put forth the idea of additional height in return for a bigger or enhanced greenway. And you know, the way this evolved in the plan was that's always been, because it's such a specific thing that you would want to accomplish at that site, it was seen as a kind of an obvious trade-off to maybe create some flexibility to maybe get more. It's a tactic that a version of which we've used in South Waterfront. So that's how that got defined separately. By the time, honestly, at the point we're at now, are thinking about all of these bonuses is somewhat altered in that we have a clearer sense of priorities. That's what your Amendment A gave us. And but the principle that was introduced in this plan and that we're carrying through is still there, that where we're talking about additional height or additional floor area ratio, it's always coming as a bonus. The idea of that not getting some public benefit to earn it is not something that the Planning and Sustainability Commission was supportive of. So every time we talk about height or FAR increases, that's a situation where we should find the right way to extract some value and return to that for a public benefit. A bonus is what I'm really talking about. On the Pearl Waterfront is the only place where we said we particularly are interested in the Greenway because really the staff and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee saw that as something that our experience has been is hard to get and is critically important for the site, and it's a limited area.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for staff?
So on Amendment 49, just want to clarify, Tracy Prince testified about the views from the Vista Bridge and Washington Park. And is that, are you intending to include that in the update to the scenic plan inventory?
Absolutely, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay, it's getting nods from
yes
the support team there. Other questions? Okay, so now I think we need to walk through council votes on the packages as we have put them in front of us. So the first package is the consent package of all of the items that we did not separately address in these proposal groups.
Correct.
And that were not checked with a check mark for discuss. So are we clear on what that package is? And we've had a little bit of testimony about a couple of them, but no recommendations about changes in them. So,
correct. Well, I think, is there a clarification?
Is there a clarification on any of those?
I think staff and I just discussed it, so I think you're clear with where we are. I don't think we need it unless anyone there does.
So correct.
Okay, then
And
unless.
how many, what's the total number of amendments in package A?
I can probably clarify. So there were 72 primary amendments.
Put your microphone on? I think your microphone's, yeah.
Clarify my microphone. 72 primary amendments, and then there were the supplementals. So of those 72, they're all before you in one way or another except for 40, 45, and 46. So.
Right, so but in this, in the consent package A, how many amendments are there?
Well, that includes everything in those first 72 except 40, 45, 46, except 7 through 11,
except 18, 22, 24, 57, and 43.
66,
And-
right?
And 69, which was withdrawn or never moved.
So just quick with the math, it's 66 are in the consent package.
That's helpful.
Okay. Everyone comfortable with taking a roll call vote on those? So on the adoption of those amendments, roll call, please.
Fritz?
I'm absolutely disgusted with this entire hearing. I think it was unfortunate to put amendments out that people thought they were going to be able to testify on and were not able to. I've always said that there's no purpose in having a public hearing if you're not going to listen to what the public said. So perhaps the majority of council was being honest in that they had already made up their minds on those without hearing from folks, but still, that did not feel good. What we are doing is spot zoning to benefit particular developers in particular places, many of whom the particular developers being allied with members of the council, and we are ruining the vista that we now have on our precious waterfront park. So just as previous councils were lauded for taking away the parking facility, which is now Pioneer Courthouse Square, this council is going to be remembered for putting potentially 250-foot stalks in the middle of a row of historic 75-foot height limits, and also allowing the Met Club that got denied on the Block 7, allowing them to do by right on a different block without really any public input on that, and that is appalling to me. We are ignoring our current comprehensive plan policy to maintain housing potential, which is policy 4.8. We're supposed to act in accordance with the comprehensive plan until we change it. By not changing it first and not even having that proposed change called out, we're being dishonest. And I'm appalled. No.
Fish.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone who's taken time over these hearings to testify and to share their views with the council. I want to especially recognize all the citizens who signed up for the various committees that reviewed this, starting with the advisory committee, and obviously our friends at Planning and Sustainability Commission, and now it comes to us after one of the most exhaustive public processes that I can think of. I think we can have differences of opinion on this body without questioning people's motives or denigrating people who's served in a volunteer capacity. And I regret that there has been in the testimony, some people have chosen to raise claims about the stakeholder committee and the way they approach their work. One of the roles that we play here that's very important is we play a referee role and a substantive role. And we take very seriously claims that are raised from any source that somehow a process is not fair or is not structured appropriately. And I think we get into a very, very bad habit in our city and in our civic debate, where because of a fundamental difference of opinion on a policy matter, we make ad hominem comments about people that were asked in the process to provide their best guidance. And I would suggest to you that if we continue down that path in our debate, we will start looking indistinguishable from our friends in Washington, D.C. And I sincerely hope that we continue to hold a higher standard in this city of civic debate where we do not question people's motives and we do not make wild claims about people's intentions, that we engage differences and we do them honestly and fairly, and then we cast our votes and we move forward. And I regret that there is this cloud that has now been placed over this process, because I think it obscures a tremendous amount of good work. And so I'll begin by not just thanking the public that has weighed in, but I want to thank the staff that has worked tirelessly. I do not remember a more complicated process, and I actually thought that even with really a small avalanche of amendments brought in a fairly tight time frame, staff did a remarkable job making sure that council had the information, had their particular view about each item, and further carved out the time to brief us and make sure that you could be responsive to our concerns. And we could not ask anything more of our team, and so I want to really extend my deep thanks to the Planning Bureau and its staff and everyone who worked on this, and in particular to Joe, because Joe often gets the brunt of some of the closed-door discussions where we're kicking around ideas. And I know that my understanding of these things has always gotten sharper because of that give and take. So I thank you about that. And to the larger process question, I also don't remember a time when so many amendments that made so many important substantive improvements to a plan were adopted with so little controversy. And I guess it's a cup half full, cup half empty, but we've done a substantial amount of work, and it is largely responsive to the tremendously compelling testimony we received in our first hearing on this. And I thank my colleague, Commissioner Fritz in particular, for distilling a lot of the concerns people had around environmental issues and tree code and zoning issues and placing those before us. You know, we all have a stake in what our city is going to look like, and we all take pride in our city. And I would certainly not do anything today which I thought was going to take away from the continued enhancement of what I think is the most livable city in America. And so this is not the final word on the West Quad plan or the comp plan. And we'll come back and refine it if we got something wrong, and we'll continue to get it right. But I'm proud of the process that I've witnessed in this matter. And today I'm pleased to cast my vote as aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I particularly appreciate the work that's been conducted by the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, the Portland Housing Bureau, and I think virtually all of the offices around here about the importance of narrowing our bonuses down to, you know, if I had my druthers, it'd be simply affordable housing, but I understand affordable housing, historic preservation are also very important, seismic issues as well. But we really need to take the bold steps, and I appreciate, my concern had always been that we're going to do that too late. And I think we're really getting ahead of the curve now. I mean, we're doing it in the West Quad plan with good language in here. And I hope we'll be doing it also in the comp plan when we get to that date, because it's very important. And I think that, you know, some people may misconstrue our support for height in this city. You know, there's two issues around height, I guess I'd like to say, is one, I don't consider height to be vertical sprawl. You know, I consider height, particularly in the West Quadrant, to be what defines a city. A skyline defines a city, and there's nothing to be ashamed about, a skyline. And secondly, it is because I want to see that height result in additional affordable housing, affordable to people, and people can live and work in our downtown. So these are issues why I come to the support of these amendments, or I should say maybe in opposition to some of the amendments that were put forward. But you know, I'm not going to be shy or defensive about it at all. I feel great about this. This is what makes this city a great city. Aye.
Novik?
I'm continually amazed and impressed by how many people in this city devote countless unpaid hours looking at issues like this, and it makes me very proud. And I second what Commissioner Fish said about the amazing work that the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability has done in the past just couple of weeks, explaining the issues to us and dealing with our numerous amendment proposals and helping to organize this proceeding today. I'm incredibly grateful. So thank you very, very much. And also thanks to my own staff and staff of my bureaus who responded to my numerous frantic questions over the past few days. Aye.
Hales?
I'm going to support this package of amendments. I guess I just want to remind my colleagues, including you, Commissioner Fritz, that these were amendments that were proposed by members of council. The majority of them were proposed by Commissioner Fritz. Aye. Okay, that package is adopted. Now let's move to items 7 through 11. So any further questions or comments about these?
Give us 1 sec, Mayor, just to, in all the drama here, I misplaced a few papers, so.
All right, this is complicated.
just, give me a sec.
These are the habitat, and restoration.
These are the habitat?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The five items relating to habitat and habitat restoration, and Bob Salinger testified about those. So any further discussion about those? So roll call on items 7 through 11 together.
Fritz?
Well, thank you very much to the Bureau of Planning staff who have been very responsive throughout this process and given my staff and me lots of maps and more maps and bigger maps and different maps. Lots of very responsive, and I appreciate your pulling this together so quickly. I want to thank Clara Adamsick and Tom Bizot on my staff, who have also been working night and day on this package, and Bob Salinger for these particular amendments, which, as he said, definitely do add specificity and make the river what it should, go towards making the river what it should be, which is the center of our city and not at the edges of any district. Aye.
Fish.
I enthusiastically support these amendments, and I thank in particular Commissioner Fritz and Bob Salinger for framing these issues, and I'm proud as the commissioner in charge of BES to be part of this great team that has a chance to continue to get it right in this river. Between these changes, between the work we're doing on Superfund and a host of other things, we are heading closer and closer to the vision which Bureau Cats one day had of a river that we can all have access to, we can recreate in, and healthy, and that is open and accessible to all. So thank you. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Novick?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. Okay, done. Now let's move to the next package, which is items 18, 22, 24, and 57, dealing with waterfront park and trails. Give everybody a chance to catch up to those in the document. Any questions for staff on those? Ready for a vote on those?
Actually, Mayor, I think my vote, I can't vote on 24 as part of the rest of the package.
All right,
I'd
so you
rather
want to
have that divided
unbundle
up.
those? We can take them individually then, if you prefer. Okay, let's do that then. Let's take them individually. Let's start with number 18. Ready to take a roll call on 18, which the effect of which is changing the timeline from 2 to 5 years to 6 to 20.
Fritz?
Colleagues, we exist and we work together in the commission form of government, and I am the commissioner in charge of parks. I've been given the extremely challenging task not only of implementing a bond measure, which at the mayor's request I helped get passed last year, and also working to spend all the delightful system development charge money that's coming in via my other bureau, the Bureau of Development Services. It's really busy in parks right now. And I'll just remind you, we passed a package, the voters of Portland, thank you, passed the Parks Replacement Bond, which gives us $68 million for fixing our broken park system. We need $360 million over the next 10 years. So we don't have the money to do a planning process for a park that's already got a plan. Everybody already said they love the park. It's great. And of course, every park in Portland could have something that could be better in it. We are missing the money for implementation, and we've got to be focused. And we cannot say yes to every good suggestion that comes along in the order that it comes along. Please don't get ahead of the budget process. We just did that with the $15 an hour resolution, so that now we've got less money to spend on fixing the problem of parks employees on food stamps, on Medicaid, not being able to get paid a living wage. There are huge problems in parks that need funding, and this is not one of them. So please, please accept this amendment. Aye.
Fish?
Well, I thought the discussion on this was excellent, and I actually did not come in with a fixed mind on anything before us today. And as evidence of that is I've heard the impassioned plea of my colleague on this, and I'm inclined to agree with her. No.
Saltzman? Was that an aye?
No.
No, sorry.
I voted no.
You said you agreed with me.
Well, if you agree with her, you should vote yes.
The motion is to change the timeline to 6 to 20.
The aging process can be very challenging on all of us. I apologize. Aye.
Thank you.
Saltzman.
No.
Novick.
I defer to the commissioner in charge of parks on this issue, partly because she's the commissioner in charge of parks, but also because she constantly reminds us that we do have choices to make and we have to prioritize. And when she tells me what she needs to prioritize within her limited resources, I'm generally going to listen to her. Also, with regard to the discussion between Commissioners Fritz and Fish a little bit ago about Waterfront Park being a regional park that benefits the whole city, that's true. But Waterfront Park, but to Commissioner Fritz's comments about East Portland, Waterfront Park is a lot more accessible to people who live near the river than to people who live in, say, 130th. And I think that that's something we need to keep in mind. Aye.
Hales.
I'll also defer to you, Amanda, on this point, though I hear the plea for action with respect to Waterfront Park, and I think there are going to be projects where we're going to want to move more quickly. I'm hoping and trusting that the existing master plan is sufficiently clear to allow us to do that, so that if the Transportation Commissioner does what I hope we can do and take the east side lane of NATO Parkway and make it into a two-way bikeway sometime soon, or at least to try out the concept that the existing Waterfront Park Master Plan allows us to do that, and that if, as I fervently hope, we get the James Beard Public Market under construction and we need different sidewalk connections across the park in order to make that public space work with reconfigured ramps, which now appear possible, that we won't have a master plan problem. So I'm assuming that if nothing else, we may have to, by council action and staff work rather than consultants and long processes, may have to make some amendments in that plan. But accept your point that there are other long-term planning actions that still need to be done, and we'll work with the plan we have for now. Aye. Okay, number 22.
So did we already adopt 21?
Yes.
So I just call out for everybody's attention that that was a substitute,
Right.
knowing that we won't be able to, hoping that we weren't going to do the entire master plan, but looking at a small piece to improve the Hawthorne Bowl, which Willie Levinson referenced with his human access project.
Right.
So
That's
it's
the
not
kind
that
of
we're
thing.
not going to do any of it, it's just that we want to be realistic about how big a bite we can chew.
It gives us a place to start. It gives us a place to start. And just on, for your information, on number 22, the action this is a specific action that would be implemented by an updated waterfront master plan. So if you delayed that, it would be logical to delay this as well on 22.
Okay, is that clear to the council? All right, so roll call on 22 then, please.
Fritz.
Thank you for that clarification. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
No.
Novick.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. Okay, 24.
Roll call.
This is the native plantings. Questions about that? Okay, roll call on that.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I just
questions?
want, I do not support the amendment as written because of the language "and along the Willamette," so I would support changing the timeline. But I would support it deleting the language "and along the Willamette." So I don't know if I should offer an amendment to the amendment or how
Oh, yeah,
exactly to
no, I
express
see
my
that
desire.
now.
Can you explain to me the reason for that?
Because it's, yeah, go ahead.
I'm deferring to the staff arguments on that topic, but this is specific action in the downtown district.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you raised that question because it also appears to be in conflict with number 21, right? That if we're going to have enhanced public access to the bowl, then why are we doing plantings? You know, where are we doing what?
Well, correct, and that's why all these places, the 5 to 7 sites that we talked about earlier for in-water or habitat restoration or improvement are also places that could possibly be swimming holes, that also could be places for other kinds of access. So part of what we want to do is sort that out and pick the best sites for each of those uses.
Right, and this is also actually part of the waterfront master plan update that we're now not doing.
Correct.
And I'm happy to accept that as a friendly amendment to delete the "and along the Willamette."
And just for the native plantings along the Willamette, I believe that we probably already have cover to pursue that kind of action if it was desirable in the citywide, central citywide.
Right, and this lives within the downtown district, which is really only about Waterfront Park.
Right, so that would be
Of
appropriate.
course, there's nothing to stop us from doing some of these action items earlier than we're promised.
That would be lovely. So I'm assuming that we have consensus about a friendly amendment to delete the words "and along the Willamette." Is that correct?
I don't remember who seconded this particular one, but yes.
I don't know if we need,
For the
we need
purposes
to
of
amend,
discussion,
formally
Commissioner
amend the
I
amendment.
think Commissioner Fritz also just said that nothing prevents us from taking this up in the spring bump, Mayor, so.
Okay.
We can go ahead with this vote.
So I'll rule that a friendly amendment, and we'll vote on number 24 minus those 4 words.
Fritz,
Thank you for the correction. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman,
No.
Novick,
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. And 57. Now here there was,
So if I could just
yeah, there was a
clarify.
question here.
Here, the action really is to make this a joint sort of action item for Parks and for Bureau of Transportation, and to make it ongoing. So this is sort of just baseline kind of improvements to the system that we pursue. And in some places, Parks is going to want to be the lead, some places PBOT, and we're counting on the bureaus to sort that out.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The two bureaus are in accord about that. Any further questions? Roll call.
Fritz,
It was kind of interesting on this one. It was like, he's in charge. No, she's in charge. So we decided that we would do it together. Aye.
Fish,
Aye.
Saltzman,
Aye.
Novick,
Aye.
Hales.
Aye. Okay, and then the last package is the Pearl District Waterfront, but it's actually 42 and 43, correct?
Just
Both-
43.
Both, sorry?
Sorry, it's just 40. The only action that changes heights on the waterfront is 43, so that's the relevant amendment. And what this proposed amendment would be to not raise heights on the Pearl waterfront. If this amendment would be approved, it would not raise heights on Pearl waterfront. That's the biggest action. And it would not allow greenway enhancements to be considered as part of the package of what you looked at when you were getting a bonus for extra height.
Joe, just to be clear, I thought that the amendment includes those, but it also includes other language, which I thought planning and sustainability supported. So I thought that we actually had a choice between approving one version of, rejecting it entirely or approving one or the other version.
Yes, and I apologize for contributing to the confusion here, because I'm a little bit confused myself. This amendment had 2 pieces in it. And there's the part that refers to the area around the 13th Avenue District, and there's the Pearl waterfront. The proposed amendment, so that is our original language in the plan, right?
Right.
And the proposed amendment would scratch the Pearl waterfront piece and also limit the transfer eligible things to consider to be preservation or affordable housing. No.
I apologize.
no
I
greenway.
was confused. Thank you.
But it's easily confused.
All right, and staff recommends supporting that amendment,
And
right?
we haven't actually voted on 42 either. That was checked.
I didn't think we had, so,
I thought it went to.
My understanding was that 42 was discussed but was included as part of the consent.
Yeah, I think you did do that,
Okay.
because
All
you
right.
all agreed on that.
okay, as long as that's clear in the record, then I'm.
Staff would still, the staff recommendation is to still consider the height increase on Pearl waterfront and to still consider evaluation of a greenway transfer and improvement as part of getting to that height. That's our recommendation.
But you.
We
Do not support the amendment as written.
And that's because, let's be clear about that, because I don't think we've clarified.
amendment
But- And if you look at the BPS recommendation, it's the second paragraph. Staff does not support the leading waterfront. We recommend development of zoning tools that would allow increased height in exchange for greenway enhancements along the waterfront. We just want to explore it. The principle that Commissioner Fritz has put out there is that bonus or no bonus, it's not a step down to the river and it's not acceptable. That's sort of your argument. If we are to include it, we'd still like to consider the greenway enhancements as one of the ways to get there. And also acknowledge that when we bring that whole package back to you, it may not be a way to get to the additional, you may want to just use all that for affordable housing or some other purpose, but we were still planning to explore the economics of it.
Joe, I'm never shy about confessing my ignorance about something. So it just seems like there's embedded in this issue are three different ideas, at least three components. And I want to make sure I understand, if we vote down the amendment, then what stands?
That we will carry into the development of the implementing plan, increasing heights, maximum heights along the Pearl waterfront.
From what to what?
175 to 250, so an additional 75 feet. And we're going to bring you back provisions that will make that additional 75 feet accessible only in exchange for some public benefit. There's item 2. The public benefit that the community was supporting and advocating that we want to explore is enhanced greenway. But we also have heard that, it will be part of that bonus package. So you're going to look at it in terms, comparing that with the other items that you've already prioritized over it to see if it still makes sense or you want to go with the priorities as you set them.
So if we reject this amendment, you will continue to develop that proposal, and that will come to us in the Central City Plan with a change in the map. Until such time as you do that, there's no change in the map.
Correct.
No one can build that building.
Correct. This is.
But the direction then would be to
The
go ahead
direction would
and
be to
raise
go,
the heights.
the direction would be to go develop a proposal to raise the heights based on the accessibility of those public benefits. And you're also reviewing which ones work and don't work, correct? So I'm comfortable with letting them do that work, even though I'm not quite sure I'm ready to go all the way to that 250-foot height.
So let me I have a little visual aid here. This is 250 feet along the waterfront, the greenway.
Well, actually, it's way up here where there's already
I
a
know.
building almost that tall.
So that's what it's, but this one, this building here, I know is 235. And so these two bridgehead things are going to be bigger than that. So imagine going up over here, having that amount of height.
Right, but these are buildings that would be across the street from other buildings, not across the street from Waterfront Park.
Well, no, but they're going to be by the greenway. So look at the
No,
shadow
the
from this.
buildings that would be by the Greenway are the ones that are on the other side of Nadeau Parkway, which are already there.
But look at the shadow from this building here, which I think is at 300. Sorry, I keep showing them.
So this area that we're talking about now is the area between Nadeau Parkway and the riverbank.
I apologize.
So
I
it
thought it
is
was
the
inland
the
from
stretch
Nadeau
where there's
Parkway.
today there are a couple of office parks, which at some point, would probably be redevelopment sites. They're 2 and 3 stories with lots of surface parking. Centennial Mills, a few warehouses, not much else.
So an enhanced greenway, if it's a more shaded greenway with massive buildings over it, really isn't a good trade. And speaking to Commissioner Saltzman's point, we should be really focusing on affordable housing as the main reason to have the bonus. That was a brilliant suggestion that you came up with. This is, the reason I didn't support the request of Goose Hollow and others and West End to lower the heights is because I think people have a reasonable expectation when they buy a property that the zoning is the zoning and the height expectation is the height expectation. This proposal would give additional height. And I think we need to be really clear to the Bureau now, no, we really are talking about historic preservation and affordable housing. The other bonuses, the Greenway, I've still got to figure out how we're going to fund that, but it's not a good trade to have a much taller building next to the Greenway in order to have a nicer Greenway.
So
I'll just chime in. I support the increased height. Again, for what I said earlier, I want to get the affordable housing. I'm skeptical about the Greenway bonus too, but I'm deferring to Joe and in saying, give us a chance to at least look at it. And I know that study is underway right now, so that's kind of why I would oppose the amendment.
So,
But the action item as is doesn't have affordable housing in it.
If I could offer, there's 2 decision points, and actually, there's really just one. Is the potential for a 75-foot height bonus on the Pearl waterfront acceptable? That's question one, going from 175, but with a bonus, to 250. And Commissioner Fritz has just made the argument that it, for a step down the river, it is not. That's the argument she just made. Okay, so that's one. And then two, what bonus would you even consider for an increase like that? And what we have heard clearly, and you actually adopted in that additional amendment about the bonus system, is that it goes affordable housing, historic, seismic, open space, and we're going to come back with you all and talk about all those. This Greenway trade-off, in my book, is sitting there in the open space bundle of that policy that you adopted to tell us how to redesign the bonus system. And when we come back, you will make amendments to even that package, because you're going to have real options and real numbers to look at. So is 250 just too tall at this site? That would be one decision. And do you need to tell us now not to consider a Greenway trade-off, or are you willing to look at it and consider it later?
And I would just jump in totally out of place here and say, I'd really strongly encourage you not to just dump the Greenway consideration from how that would work in that narrow strip of land between NATO and the river, because that's a place where, unlike South Waterfront with a different set of Greenway regulations, we currently only have a 25-foot setback required from the bank of the river, which is woefully inadequate. Anyway, it's a place we really need to redevelop the whole Greenway, and there's going to be challenges there. But the only way that additional taller buildings in that area could maybe be acceptable was with much more than 25 feet. So I wouldn't take it, if you're going to have any kind of consideration of do we want anything more, would we maybe be accepting of anything over 175, which, by the way, includes some bonuses already. The base height's 100, so the 75 that are, it's already in there, I believe, as a bonus. I'm looking at Mark. Mark's gone.
Joe, what's currently the tallest building in the?
I wouldn't leave it completely.
Excuse me.
Right. What's the tallest building in the Pearl?
Well, it's in this section, right? Oh, in the Pearl itself?
So the tallest building in the Pearl is being built right now, right? And it's between the two parks. It's Hoyt Street Properties' latest project, and I believe it's, I need Mark again, it's in the 300-foot range.
Right. So it's the one that just across the street from the fields.
Correct.
And it's all.
So the Metropolitan's the tallest one today, and that's 225 feet. This new one under construction.
Metropolitan's 225?
Right.
Would you really want that by the Greenway?
Well,
so South Waterfront is a good example. The buildings that are closest to the Greenway in South Waterfront are 250, exactly. So the Merriweather and the Atwater Place.
And the waterfront, the Greenway at South Waterfront is a lot more than 25 feet.
Yeah.
And
So we're trying to find another way to that accommodation.
And is the dilemma here in part that unless we add the 75 feet, we can't trigger the bonus? We can't condition the bonus? We need the 75 feet to create the bonus?
No, it's,
Well, go ahead.
no, I mean, I think if there's bonus there today, we can look at reprogramming the way that you get an existing bonus provision.
We don't have to do this to get the affordable
No,
housing bonus.
it's an additional tool. Do we want to put this additional leveraging point on the table or not?
So it really comes down to size, mass, scale.
It comes down partly to the discussion that we had many times over at the Stakeholder Advisory Committee about activating the waterfront and about the desire for more both commercial and residential activity and being, in terms of right across the street instead of several blocks in. And there were many people on the committee that felt very strongly about that.
And I would just say that the idea didn't actually come from staff at all. This came from the Pearl District Neighbors Association folks, Patty Gardner and her group who work on this a lot. And there's a vision and a desire for an intensely urban and exciting, city waterfront in that area. That very different from what's there now. And so they wanted to, see if we wanted to allow more, if we could really get that high intensity urban waterfront. That was their idea.
So you oppose, the Bureau's position is don't adopt the amendment?
That's
correct.
Joe, I just
Even though it
wanted-
says support here.
Yeah, that's the problem. It says support. So my impression was that in order to remove the height bonus overlay from properties within the
Well, it's
Northwest 13th
3
Avenue Historic District, we would have to pass the amendment, and I thought you wanted that.
No,
Did you support this
no,
amendment before you oppose it?
the part that's, in the amendment is the strikeout and underline. The text, the action item itself is an action item in the West Quadrant Plan, correct?
Right.
So the amendment would be to eliminate Pearl Waterfront as part of the places you're considering additional height, to eliminate consideration of greenway enhancements as a way to get to that additional height.
Okay.
And to add affordable housing?
It does add affordable housing in this particular reference, so, which we're supportive of.
seismic.
But we think that your amendment A from the new amendments today, that's why we went back to that, Commissioner. We found ourselves
all right.
not being clear enough. That's the clear statement. Amendment
Okay,
A.
so you think A has captured the affordable housing issue because it says so?
Right. I think A tells us what to do with the bonus system.
All right. All right, now I understand. So that's why now you would oppose this amendment?
Right.
Okay, I'm tracking now.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
We put support.
Yeah, and I understand the concern that you raised, Commissioner Fritz, but this is the Greenway, not waterfront part we're talking about. And a 175-foot building will shade the Greenway. No matter, I mean, the building you can build today will shade the Greenway. 175 feet will shade 25 feet. So I guess I'm not seeing the harm done by allowing them to continue to develop this concept, again, understanding that they're going to come back to us with a different set of bonus provisions. So, all right, at least I'm clear now in my own mind. Anybody else have further questions before we vote on this? Okay, let's take a roll call on this amendment.
Number 43.
On 43.
Okay. Fritz?
Well, I appreciate that we've adopted the policy to have a step down to the river. I support this amendment. Aye.
Fish?
I very much appreciate this discussion. It's a very close call, but I vote no.
Schultzman?
No.
Novick?
No.
Hales?
No. Okay, I think we're done with amendments.
Yes.
Right? So this is a resolution. I'm personally prepared to move forward. I know there was some concern that we needed to wait, but this council has a lot of business before it over the next few weeks, and this bureau has a lot of work to do. So I would prefer that we, if the council is willing to take the vote to adopt this resolution as amended today and allow this hardworking group of people to go do more hard work.
I would just, if I can have 30 seconds, just
Please.
want to thank all of your bureaus, because 90% of what we do is collate and pull together everybody else's information. You know, we don't run parks or transportation or housing or PDC or all the other programs, and they provided an enormous amount of information. They were answering questions. We would call them as citizens came and provided new input, and they were at hundreds and hundreds of different conversations. And so it really is a team effort, and as usual, we're sort of this nexus place that is kind of just bringing it together. So we really, really appreciate all of your staff's work. And I wanted to thank Sally, Carl, Mindy, Debbie, Nicholas, Joe, Jackie on your staff, Catherine, anyone else I missed, because people really did put an amazing amount of work, and because they are such great planners, that's why you get such amazing little handouts to be able to check off the list. And so we're happy to hand those out to any other bureau that wants to use them. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. Let's take our vote.
Fritz?
Well, thank you to the Planning Bureau staff and to all of the staff, particularly in my Bureau of Parks, who did a lot of work over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and also your staff in Transportation, Commissioner Novick, and your office. I do appreciate all of the good work that's gone into this, including a lot of citizen time. Unfortunately, I can't support it because I think we haven't gotten to the right endpoint, and I think that when these huge buildings start going up right on the Greenway and on Waterfront, that people are going to be quite upset. No.
Fish?
The only other thing I'll add to my prior comments is I want to thank Liam Frost on my team. As many of you know, Hannah Kuhn left me to travel the world, which means Liam has had to double duty. And it's been especially hard on Liam because I believe Swansea is about to get relegated. So I know that's been weighing heavily on him. So to Liam and everyone in my office, thanks for the good work that you've done helping me get up to speed. Susan, to all the people on your team, special thanks. And also the folks in my bureaus, and I know particularly folks in the Bureau of Environmental Services have been at the table crafting solutions in response to some of the amendments that have been brought and throughout this process, and I'm grateful for their professionalism and good work. Aye.
Saltzman?
I also want to thank Bureau of Planning Sustainability, the West Quadrant Stakeholder Advisory Committee, the Planning and Sustainability Commission members, and people on my staff who've labored through these documents. And I know that we will be coming back in May with the study about the affordable housing bonuses, and I look forward to a good discussion and hopefully aggressive movement on that. And I feel good that we're going to get those affordable housing bonuses in place in time. And so that's the most important part to me. Thank you for all your work. Aye.
Novick?
I reiterate all my thanks to everybody I thanked before. I also want to thank Commissioner Fritz for noting a couple of weeks ago that the original draft committed her bureaus to a variety of different action items that she wasn't sure that they could do or should do, which brought me to actually go through and make sure that we identified all the things that PBOT was scheduled to do that it wasn't sure that they should do. So thanks to PBOT staff and my staff for working on that, and thanks to BPS for being accommodating on allowing us to not do things that we didn't think that we were equipped to do. Aye.
Hales?
Well, Susan, Joe, to you and your whole team, thank you. It's a great deal of work on your part. We also, although I think only none of them are still present, we ought to thank our amazing citizen volunteers at the Planning and Sustainability Commission and the committee that labored so hard to bring this proposal to us. And I also want to thank the council for both our willingness to work through these issues in great detail and to have a very constructive dialogue with literally hundreds of people that have come in to testify. You know, every now and then in this work, we walk out of these hearings and we say, it's amazing, you know, we get this incredibly thoughtful citizen testimony, and we really do. But I want to reflect on that a little more broadly and think back to the 10 years prior to my service again here, working all over the country, going to lots of other city councils and planning commissions around the country. And I really don't think we understand how high caliber this work is in Portland. You know, we often say we don't think, you know, other councils get to have this kind of dialogue. Well, frankly, other cities don't appear to have this kind of sophisticated citizen engagement, whether it's as neighborhood activists or volunteers on this committee. They don't have planners as good as our planners. And they don't have a city council that gets into this level of rigor and detail on planning, and they don't do the front-end planning like Portland does, so that we can then have a land use hearing like we had yesterday on a design case where the foundation's already in place. The neighborhood knows what it's supposed to be. They've done a master plan for the part that's developing next door. The development community and the architects know what's expected. We've raised the bar very high. That just isn't the case in Fort Worth or Atlanta or a lot of the other places where I worked. And I don't think we always realize here in Portland, as we're bearing down on these details, really how good we've got it. We don't always get it exactly right, but boy, we get it a lot more right than everywhere else I've ever seen. So from my perspective, which hopefully is helpful to all of us and reassuring us that good work is being done here, it really is. And I'm very proud of you all. Thank you very much. Aye. We're adjourned.